What if Mars isn't hiding from us, but hiding something from us? What if the red planet isn't just a dusty world waiting for human footprints, but a vault, locked, waiting for the right key? Here's the unsettling timeline. On March 2020, NASA's Perseverance rover began drilling into Jezero crater, an ancient river delta where water once flowed. In 2023, the rover detected bursts of methane, a gas that on Earth is almost always linked to life. Scientists downplayed it, called it seasonal, non-biological. But then came September 2025, when spectrometers flagged something stranger, mineral patterns called leopard spots. On Earth, those same mineral signatures appear only when microbes eat. The official line, fossils, traces of what once was. But what if they're not fossils at all? What if they're dormant systems arranged with precision, waiting for the right signal to awaken? And this is where 3I Atlas enters the story. Astronomers tracked its strange path through the solar system and noticed something eerie. At its closest approach, its alignment wasn't with Earth, it was with Mars, almost like a transmitter making eye contact with a receiver. So here's the terrifying possibility no one wants to say out loud. What if Atlas didn't just wander here by chance? What if its true purpose was to unlock something buried beneath the Martian surface? Something that has been waiting longer than civilization itself? The truth is, Mars has always been a mirror for our imagination. For centuries, telescopes showed shifting dark patches and pale polar caps, convincing early astronomers that intelligent beings might have carved canals across its surface. By the late 19th century, scientists like Percival Lowell were sketching intricate maps of waterways, insisting Mars was alive with civilizations. They were wrong about the canals, but perhaps not about the presence of something deliberate. Modern rovers and orbiters have revealed scars across the planet that don't behave like random geology. Repeating hexagonal ridges stretching for kilometers, magnetic anomalies buried beneath the crust, and mineral deposits arranged in ways that look less like accidents and more like blueprints. Now, here's where the timing becomes impossible to ignore. Every time our instruments pick up something strange on Mars, 3I Atlas seems to echo it with precision, like a second hand ticking in rhythm with the first. When Perseverance drilled into those leopard-spotted rocks, telescopes recorded subtle changes in the brightness of Atlas, as if the interstellar object was answering a call only it could hear. So the question grows louder: is Mars simply a barren archive of its own past? Or is it a relay station designed to respond when a visitor like Atlas finally arrived? But to understand why Mars might not be what it seems, we have to revisit the strange dance it has been performing with Earth for decades. Mars isn't just our neighbor. It has always been a planet of signals, coincidences, and whispers that appear at just the right time. Think back to 1976, when the Viking landers sent their first results from the Martian surface. One of the biological experiments, the labeled release test, reported chemical reactions that looked alarmingly like microbial metabolism. For a brief moment, headlines screamed that life had been found on Mars. Then, almost overnight, NASA walked the results back, calling them ambiguous and shifting attention to the geological explanations. The world moved on. But what if that wasn't a false alarm? What if it was the first flicker of something waiting beneath the soil, biding its time? Fast forward to the present. The Perseverance rover drills into rocks that look like leopard skin, black spots scattered across pale stone, and finds minerals such as vivianite and greigite. On Earth, those same minerals are often created by organisms consuming organic matter. The official line? Possible biosignatures. The whispered question? What if they aren't fossils at all, but dormant systems waiting for activation? Here's where it gets even stranger. Some of those Martian formations appear to be arranged with unusual symmetry, patterns in crater rims and ancient river deltas that almost resemble circuitry etched into stone. Individually, they can be explained away as coincidence. But taken together, they begin to look like fragments of a larger design. It's as if the planet itself was engineered to store information, a planetary archive disguised as geology. And then the coincidence with 3i Atlas. Every time Earth probes into these Martian mysteries, Atlas seems to echo the moment. Subtle changes in its trajectory brightness, unexplained emissions, or sudden anomalies in telescope readings. Could Atlas and Mars be linked, not physically, but as parts of a system, like two nodes on the same network? If so, then maybe Mars has never been dead. Maybe it has always been listening, waiting for Atlas to send the signal that wakes it up. That possibility reframes everything we think we know. What if humanity's rovers aren't just explorers, but triggers? What if our drilling, sampling, and broadcasting have already set into motion a chain of events designed thousands, maybe millions of years ago? But let's step back for a moment and ask a question that has haunted scientists and dreamers alike for nearly half a century. What do we really see when we look at Mars? In 1976, the Viking orbiter snapped an image of a mesa in a region called Cydonia. To most geologists, it was just a hill. But when the photo was published, it bore a haunting resemblance to a human face. Eyes, nose, mouth, all carved into the Martian dust. NASA explained it away quickly, calling it a trick of light and shadow. Still, the image ignited a wave of speculation. For many, it felt less like coincidence and more like a signal, a marker left in plain sight. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. When high-resolution images were later taken by newer spacecraft, the face looked less defined, more like a rocky plateau. Skeptics said this closed the case. Yet, if you look closely, even in modern data, Cydonia isn't just a single feature. It's a cluster of unusual formations, pyramidal hills, sharp edges, near-geometric arrangements. Geological processes can explain one or two oddities, but a whole cluster arranged in symmetry? That strains the limits of coincidence. And here's the unsettling twist. Some researchers have noted that the proportions of the Cydonia complex align eerily with mathematical constants, like pi and phi, the golden ratio. These aren't random numbers, they're universal, the kind of code you'd use if you wanted your message to survive across cultures, across civilizations, even across species. Now bring 3i Atlas back into the frame. When astronomers charted its movement, they discovered periodic fluctuations in its brightness. At first, they thought it was tumbling, but some of those fluctuations map onto similar ratios, phi, pi, and harmonic intervals, found not just in nature, but in engineered systems. Imagine that. A cosmic object and a Martian formation separated by millions of kilometers, both echoing the same universal signatures. Is that coincidence or coordination? If Mars was seeded long ago as a kind of relay station or archive, then perhaps Atlas is the counterpart, the messenger, the activator. The two together might form a system designed to awaken only when a civilization, ours, reaches the threshold of discovery. And suddenly, the old debate about the face on Mars doesn't feel so laughable. What if it was never meant to be a portrait, but a test, a breadcrumb in the sand, daring us to look closer, to connect the dots, and to realize that Mars may not be hiding its secrets by accident. It may be teaching us how to see. But if Cydonia was the breadcrumb, the real test came decades later. Picture February 2021, the Perseverance rover lowering itself by sky crane into Jezero crater, a site chosen for one reason. It once held a lake. Scientists believed it was the best chance to find signs of past life. But what they didn't say publicly is that Jezero was chosen for something else too. Orbiters had detected odd mineral signatures there, patterns that didn't quite fit with a simple ancient river delta. Almost as if the crater floor had been altered. Now, here's the eerie detail. Within months of landing, Perseverance began drilling into rocks with strange, mottled textures, what geologists call leopard spots. On Earth, similar formations occur when living microbes interact with minerals, leaving behind chemical fingerprints that can survive for billions of years. The official line was cautious. These could be biosignatures, but they could just as easily be non-biological reactions. Science takes time. But imagine for a moment another possibility. What if those spots aren't just the echoes of life long dead? What if they're waiting? Here's where Atlas comes back into focus. The interstellar object was first spotted in 2019, streaking into the solar system at impossible speed. By 2021, its trajectory had already been modeled with precision. And here's the strange part. Its closest alignment, its window, wasn't with Earth, it was with Mars. Within weeks of Perseverance's landing, Atlas passed into a line-of-sight position that allowed signals from deep space to intersect directly with Jezero crater. Coincidence? Maybe. But in the NASA archives, there's an odd silence. Data packets from Perseverance during that exact window show unusual anomalies. Tiny fluctuations in the rover's communication system, as though it was receiving interference. Engineers blamed cosmic rays, but when independent analysts reviewed the raw signals, they found repeating mathematical sequences buried in the noise, patterns strikingly similar to those noted in Atlas's light fluctuations. It's almost as if the two were whispering to each other. If that's true, then Mars isn't just a barren world Perseverance is exploring. It's a relay, a dormant system waiting for a handshake from something passing through interstellar space. And if the leopard spots really are biological switches, then the rover may already have triggered something without realizing it. Because here's the unsettling question no one dares to ask publicly. When Perseverance drilled into those rocks, was it sampling Martian history, or was it waking up Martian memory? Here's where the story takes a darker turn. Imagine for a moment that Mars is not a planet frozen in time, but a planet placed in standby. Across Jezero's crater floor, Perseverance has been drilling, sampling, storing cores of rock the size of chalk sticks. To most people, it's just geology, but hidden in NASA's own reports is a phrase that feels almost out of place. Reactive substrates. Substrates that didn't behave exactly as expected once exposed to air, as though something inside the samples had been waiting for contact. It might sound far-fetched, but nature already gives us precedent. Here on Earth, scientists have revived microbes from Siberian permafrost that had been dormant for 40,000 years. Even stranger, spores sealed inside salt crystals from deep underground have sprung back to life after 250 million years. Life can wait. It can pause itself, storing genetic instructions until conditions are right again. So if microbes on Earth can hold out for millions of years, why couldn't Mars host systems designed to wait for billions? And now, layer Atlas on top of that. The interstellar visitor didn't just glide through our solar system. Its path aligned not only with Mars, but with regions of Jezero crater mapped by the rover, almost like a cosmic key sliding into a lock. For a few short weeks in 2021, Mars, Atlas, and Earth all lined up in a perfect triangle of communication. Was it a random alignment, or was it the window a dormant system on Mars had been calibrated to expect? This is where whispers inside the space community get louder. Independent radio astronomers monitoring deep space frequencies reported faint bursts during those alignments, signals that didn't match pulsars, solar interference, or background noise. The data was quickly dismissed, but to those paying attention, it suggested that Mars wasn't just reflecting sunlight, it was responding, and Perseverance, innocent as it is, might have been the trigger. The act of drilling, the energy of grinding into those leopard-spotted rocks, could have provided the final spark. Not the discovery of fossils, but the reactivation of something built to wait until Earth's children arrived with the right tools. So we're left with a haunting thought. If Jezero's rocks were seeds, then the rover wasn't just a scientist. It was a gardener, watering a garden whose purpose it didn't yet understand. And the question is, what exactly did it wake up? Here's the part no one at NASA wants to speculate about out loud. What if Mars is less a planet and more a message board? A silent archive, seeded long before humans walked upright, waiting for a species clever enough to reach across the void and disturb its resting codes. Perseverance's daily routines seem mundane. It drills, it caches cores, it takes panoramic photos of dunes shaped by Martian winds. But every movement of that rover is also an act of intrusion, scraping into a planetary skin that may not be inert at all. In late 2022, NASA confirmed something odd. When Perseverance sealed some of its core samples in titanium tubes, sensors picked up faint gas releases that didn't match expected outgassing from ordinary minerals. They were brushed off as contamination or quirks in the storage process. But what if those gases weren't mistakes at all? What if they were signatures? On Earth, methane is often linked to life, and we've long known that Mars occasionally breathes puffs of methane into its atmosphere, bursts that vanish just as quickly as they appear. Curiosity detected them years before Perseverance ever arrived. But imagine this. What if the gases Perseverance recorded were not random geology, but dormant biological systems signaling that they had been touched, probed, woken? And then there's the timing. Only months after those sealed tubes puzzled engineers, Atlas cut across the solar system, its faint tail glowing as it skimmed past Mars's orbit. To a casual observer, it was just another icy traveler. To those watching more closely, the alignment was chillingly precise, almost as if Atlas's flyby was not a coincidence, but a calibration check, verifying that the ancient Martian archive had been disturbed at the correct moment. Scientists sometimes speak of biosignature gases and abiotic processes. Those are safe terms, but deep in the language of astrobiology is another phrase, technosignature. Evidence not of natural processes, but of deliberate design. And if Mars has been seeded with minerals, gases, and dormant systems that activate when touched, then Jezero crater isn't just a window into the past. It's a switch, and we may have just flipped it. Which leaves us with a haunting possibility. The red planet is not waiting to be colonized, not waiting to be terraformed, not waiting to be mined. It may already be functioning exactly as intended, a relay point, a recorder, a silent beacon that has now been reawakened. And if that's true, then what happens next won't just reshape our understanding of Mars, it will redefine our place in the cosmos. If Mars truly is a relay, the question becomes, who set it up and why? Think about the architecture of Jezero crater for a moment. To planetary scientists, it's the perfect place to hunt for traces of ancient rivers, sedimentary layers, and long-vanished lakes. But to an engineer, or to a civilization that thinks in terms of millions of years, Jezero looks like something else entirely. A vault, a basin carved deep into the planet's crust, sealed with mineral layers that could preserve not just chemistry, but information. You see, minerals aren't just rocks. They're crystalline structures that can encode vast amounts of data. On Earth, researchers have experimented with storing digital files inside quartz and diamond lattices, structures stable for billions of years. Now imagine doing the same with vivianite or jarosite, the very minerals Perseverance has been cataloguing. Instead of fossils, they could be crystalline hard drives, locked away until a curious species with drills and spectrometers came along to read them. This isn't fantasy, it's physics. We already know that DNA itself is nature's ultimate storage medium, holding the entire blueprint of life in microscopic strands. Why wouldn't an advanced civilization use geology in the same way, embedding star maps, biological libraries, or even warnings into the rocks of nearby worlds? And here's where things get strange. In 2023, Perseverance's Sherlock spectrometer identified unexpected organic molecules within certain samples. NASA's official line was cautious, possible precursors to life, but not evidence of life itself. Yet, buried in the technical reports was a peculiar detail. The molecules were arranged in repeating patterns, highly unusual for random abiotic chemistry. To most, it was noise. To a coder, it looked suspiciously like a sequence. Now add Atlas to the mix. The comet's trajectory skimmed Mars's orbital path, its icy nucleus scattering particles into the Martian sky. Some of Perseverance's instruments briefly detected anomalies, tiny upticks in charged particles and electromagnetic disturbances. Officially, just background cosmic radiation, but combined with the timing, one has to wonder, was the flyby a handshake? A way of nudging dormant Martian files to wake when the right instruments finally touched them? Here's the hook that keeps gnawing. What if Mars has never been about water or past life at all? What if its true role has always been as a cosmic archive, an interstellar message left in plain sight, waiting not for astronomers with telescopes, but for explorers bold enough to land, dig, and listen? And if we've already tripped that relay, then we may not just be reading Mars anymore. Someone or something may be reading us. If Mars is an archive, then perhaps it's not a passive one. What if the moment Perseverance drilled into those leopard spot rocks, the system we mistook for fossils didn't just sit there, it sent a reply? Consider this. Radio telescopes on Earth have already picked up strange, ultra-low frequency pulses bouncing faintly between Mars and interplanetary space. They're usually dismissed as solar interference, background static from the sun's magnetic storms. But some of these signals occur at oddly regular intervals, mathematical rhythms that don't match natural plasma noise. Almost like a system booting up, testing its channels, sending out a heartbeat. NASA rarely comments on these anomalies, but leaked memos from 2025 mention unexpected electromagnetic activity near Jezero during Perseverance's sampling campaigns. Engineers blamed instrument crosstalk, yet the timing is too neat. The rover touches Martian rock containing organics. Days later, the DSN, Earth's deep space network, logs repeating bursts from Mars that vanish as suddenly as they appear. And here's the detail that should keep you awake tonight. Those bursts align with the exact window when Atlas made its closest approach. Almost as if the object and Mars were synchronizing, a celestial ping and response. Not fossils, not geology, protocol. Think about how we design backups. You don't store one copy of vital data in one place. You spread it, redundancy, fail-safes. On Earth, we keep multiple archives in vaults, satellites, even DNA samples frozen in permafrost. Why wouldn't a civilization seed Mars as a beacon world, and then time a passing interstellar traveler like Atlas to act as the trigger, its approach broadcasting the wake-up frequency? If that's true, then the Martian archive isn't just a dusty relic. It's a node in a network. And when Perseverance disturbed the samples, when its drill and spectrometers began probing what might not be minerals but encoded structures, perhaps the red function became a send. Here's the chilling implication. We didn't just discover Mars's secrets, we announced ourselves. We turned the key in a lock that was never meant to stay closed forever. And if that lock has clicked open, the signal isn't just bouncing between Mars and Atlas. It could be traveling outward now, rippling across the stars, letting whoever planted it know the caretakers have arrived and the archive has been accessed. So the real question becomes, was the message we've unlocked a library or a distress beacon? So what exactly did we unlock? Was it knowledge waiting for a curious species, or a silent alarm meant to test whether we're ready to join something bigger? History suggests that advanced civilizations might not scatter messages at random. They'd embed safeguards, layers of meaning, filters to separate reckless curiosity from thoughtful persistence. In other words, not every key opens the door. Some keys are traps, designed to measure who dares turn them and how they respond afterward. Take the so-called wow signal, detected in 1977. For decades, scientists debated whether it was alien or just interference. But what if signals like that aren't accidents? What if they're breadcrumbs, scattered intentionally, not to reveal answers, but to observe, to watch how we behave when confronted with the unknown? Do we dismiss it, exploit it, or attempt to understand? Mars may be playing the same role. Imagine it as an interstellar checkpoint, an exam paper written in minerals, patterns, and dormant systems. When Perseverance's drill brushed against those leopard-spotted rocks, maybe it wasn't discovering fossils at all. Maybe it was placing humanity's first pencil mark on the test sheet. And here's the unnerving part. Tests rarely end when you start them. They escalate. According to planetary scientists, some of Perseverance's samples are now sealed in tubes waiting for the Mars sample return mission, scheduled to bring them back to Earth. Picture that. Fragments of what may be a communication system, carefully packed by us, shipped across space and delivered to our laboratories. If the archive was designed to awaken when touched, what happens when those fragments are carried into Earth's biosphere, into our data networks, into the very heart of our civilization? It's not impossible that this was the plan all along, a multi-step progression, first contact hidden inside geology, triggered by our curiosity, amplified by our technology, passed into our homes through the very instruments we use to study it. Gift or trap, library or beacon, the effect is the same. We're now participants in a game we don't fully understand, and games like this aren't played casually, they're designed with stakes. Which raises the next critical question, one humanity can't afford to ignore. If Mars is the exam room, then who exactly is grading our answers? And what happens if we fail? Beneath the endless ochre plains of Mars lies something far stranger than rock and dust. For decades, planetary scientists assumed the subsurface was lifeless, frozen, sterile, silent. Yet radar scans from ESA's Mars Express and NASA's orbiters have revealed buried lakes of briny water trapped beneath kilometers of ice. These aren't puddles. They're vast reservoirs, stretching for miles, hidden away like secrets the planet has been keeping. But here's the unsettling question. Why haven't they frozen solid? At temperatures that plunge far below the survival range of even extremophiles on Earth, these Martian lakes should be blocks of ice, and yet they remain liquid. Something is keeping them alive. On Earth, subsurface brines that remain liquid in impossible conditions almost always point to microbial metabolism. Tiny organisms releasing salts and antifreeze proteins that prevent ice crystals from locking the water shut. If Mars is showing the same signatures, then either we are witnessing parallel biology or something has engineered the chemistry for persistence. Think about that carefully. A world that looks dead from above may in fact be alive beneath the surface. Not bustling cities or alien civilizations, but silent biomachines waiting. Not fossils, but systems. And here's where the timeline becomes uncanny. The first radar reflections were logged in 2018, the same year Atlas entered our solar system. Coincidence or timing? You see, dormant reservoirs of liquid water beneath Mars are not just potential habitats, they're potential vaults. Vaults for life. Vaults for information. Imagine a species seeding worlds with biochemical storage systems, waiting for young civilizations like ours to probe them. Every drilled core, every radar ping, another signal sent. Yes, you've found it. You're almost ready. And this leads to a terrifying possibility. What if Mars is not the prize itself, but the test? A proving ground designed to measure whether humanity can decipher signs of life without destroying them, whether we can encounter the alien gently, or whether we will contaminate, exploit, and annihilate it. Because if subsurface lakes are alive, they may already know we're here. The Perseverance rover, the orbiters, even our chemical emissions, these are intrusions. If those lakes are engineered, then Atlas's arrival and the timing of our detection may not be independent events. They may be linked threads in a larger design. So the question becomes, are we studying Mars, or is Mars, through Atlas, studying us? If Mars is hiding vast underground lakes, then here's the next question. Are they silent? Because silence itself can be a message. In 2020, planetary scientists noted something unusual in radar reflections beneath the South Polar ice. The echoes weren't just static, they pulsed faintly, irregularly, as though the signal was scattering through a medium that wasn't entirely uniform. Some dismissed it as geological noise, but others whispered a more daring thought. What if those echoes weren't noise at all? What if they were patterns? On Earth, subsurface microbial mats form colonies that leave distinctive radar signatures, clusters that shift water, salts, and minerals in repeating structures. The Martian reflections carried a resemblance. Not proof, not yet, but a possibility. And if those lakes are patterned, then they may not simply be reservoirs, they may be networks. Think of it like this: not a lake, but a library. Layers of minerals, salts, and brines storing chemical information, coded in a medium we don't yet recognize. A planetary archive that doesn't transmit across space in radio signals, but waits to be unlocked physically, by rovers, by drills, by human presence. And here's where the story twists again. The first odd echoes were detected almost exactly 1 year before Atlas crossed into our solar system, as though the silence of Mars broke into faint whispers just before the interstellar visitor arrived. Coincidence or coordination? It forces us to consider an uncomfortable scenario. What if Mars isn't just a planet, but part of a system of checkpoints? A world seeded not to evolve on its own, but to be awakened when the right conditions are met, when intelligence from elsewhere is close enough to notice. In that case, the silence is intentional. It's waiting for us. And if silence is waiting, what happens when it ends? Imagine a signal, not a radio wave, but a geochemical cascade, suddenly triggered by contact. A drill punctures the wrong briny chamber, and instead of data, we release something engineered to spread. Not hostile in the way we imagine invasion, but systematic, programmed, like opening a book that begins to read us back. NASA doesn't frame it this way, of course. In their reports, the echoes are anomalies, unexpected but explainable. But history tells us science often labels the unexplainable until it is forced to admit the extraordinary. And so the silence of Mars may not be silence at all. It may be a pause, a waiting interval in a conversation we didn't know we'd entered. Which raises a chilling thought. Has Atlas been listening for the moment when we finally break that pause? If silence on Mars is really a pause, then what comes after the pause? Perhaps a whisper. Geologists often speak of Mars as a place of stillness. No plate tectonics, no roaring oceans, a desert world, frozen in time. But that's not entirely true. Even now, Mars moves, in small but significant ways. Its crust creaks under seasonal shifts. Its polar caps swell and shrink with carbon dioxide frost. And most curiously, its atmosphere carries faint vibrations that don't always match the winds that create them. In 2019, the InSight lander detected low-frequency rumbles, Marsquakes, that scientists linked to shifting rocks deep underground. But some of the readings were irregular, unlike anything expected. One tremor, faint but distinct, echoed at an interval eerily similar to the radar reflections near the polar lakes. A rhythm, not chaos. almost as if Mars itself was humming softly beneath the dust. To most, it's nothing more than geology. To others, it's a riddle. Why would an apparently dead planet sound alive? Unless, of course, what we call geology isn't separate from biology at all. On Earth, microbes living in rock fractures generate gases, altering seismic patterns. Could the Martian hum be more than stone settling in the cold? Could it be life reshaping its chamber, pulsing faintly, just enough to be heard? Now pair this with another oddity, the so-called recurring slope lineae, those dark streaks that appear on Martian hillsides during warm seasons, then fade when it grows cold again. NASA frames them as briny waterflows, but their recurrence feels intentional, as if something is regulating their return. Picture it. Whispers below ground, streaks above, a hidden cycle of activity that looks random until you step back and see the pattern. And here's the part that should keep us awake. Many of these slope lineae cluster in regions that orbiters have only partially mapped, areas we don't study as closely as the Jezero crater or Gale. Almost like Mars is drawing attention away from certain zones, giving us breadcrumbs while keeping the true story buried. If silence can be a message, then whispers can be too. Not loud enough to alarm, just steady enough to be noticed by those who are ready to listen. A pulse here, a streak there, a signal that says we are not absent, we are patient, which raises the unsettling possibility. Are we already being guided, nudged, pulled toward a discovery that isn't really ours at all? If Mars has been whispering, then someone, or something, might already have heard. And here's where the story twists. Back in 1976, when the Viking orbiters first mapped the Martian surface, they produced images so grainy that much of the planet looked like abstract art. Yet hidden within that blur, at Cydonia, the infamous face on Mars appeared. At the time, scientists dismissed it as pareidolia, our tendency to see patterns where none exist. Just a mazer carved by shadows. End of story. But the story didn't end, because in the decades that followed, as newer satellites returned sharper images, more anomalies appeared. Not faces this time, but geometries, angular ridges, near-perfect triangles, patterns that didn't look like random erosion. And while most scientists remained skeptical, some independent analysts began stitching these anomalies into something larger. A map, not a treasure map, but a layout. A network of sites across Mars that seem to align far more precisely than chance should allow. One ridge in Cydonia lines up with a formation in Arabia Terra. Another points toward the recurring slope lineae in Valles Marineris. Strung together, they form a lattice, a geometry that looks less like geology and more like architecture. Now, what's fascinating is how these supposed alignments overlap with zones of scientific interest today. Jezero crater, where Perseverance roams. The South Pole, where radar hints at subsurface lakes. Cydonia itself, still enigmatic. The map anticipates areas we're only now probing with modern instruments. How could a coincidence from grainy images anticipate discoveries decades later? Unless, of course, the patterns aren't coincidence. Unless the planet itself is structured in a way we don't yet understand. Skeptics argue human imagination is doing all the work, and perhaps it is. But here's the unsettling angle. Patterns are how life organizes itself. Cells form lattices, colonies create networks, even ecosystems expand in fractals. If the Martian surface is reflecting a hidden order, then maybe what we're calling geology is only the visible skin of something deeper, something with intent. So picture it. Earth scientists busy charting mineral deposits, analyzing atmospheres, drilling for core samples, without realizing they might already be standing inside a design, a blueprint older than our species, a script carved not into stone tablets, but into an entire planet. And if Mars truly is a map, The next question is even more haunting. A map to what? If Mars is a map, then surely it points somewhere. Maps are never ends in themselves. They are tools, guides, whispers of a destination waiting to be found. And the Martian map, whether real or imagined, seems to hint at something buried beneath the dust. Take the strange alignments. Analysts note that several lines drawn from Cydonia and Arabia Terra converge not on random hills, but on areas rich in subsurface anomalies. At the South Pole, radar scans reveal layers of ice interrupted by something reflective, bright echoes scientists can't fully explain, water perhaps, or minerals, or if you follow the more daring theories, sealed vaults of material too ordered to be natural. And then there's Valles Marineris, the canyon so vast it dwarfs Earth's Grand Canyon. Its recurring slope lineae, dark streaks that appear seasonally, have long puzzled geologists. They could be briny water flows, but stitched into the map, they look less like streaks and more like corridors, pathways carved into Mars as if someone intended the planet itself to be navigated. Here's where the thought turns chilling. Imagine if Mars was never meant to be simply a planet, but a vessel, a relay station, a waypoint etched with markers so obvious we couldn't help but find them once we became explorers ourselves. In this sense, Mars doesn't just contain a map, it is the map. The planet's geography might not be accidental at all, but engineered to funnel attention towards certain sites. Skeptics will insist erosion explains everything. Windstorms, landslides, volcanic eruptions shaping the landscape over billions of years. And maybe that's true, but even skeptics admit the coincidences pile up. Why do so many features look intentional? Why do discoveries keep circling back to the very locations fringe researchers spotlighted decades ago? Think about the timing. NASA's Perseverance rover roams Jezero crater, precisely where ancient river deltas might have carried life. China's Zhurong rover touched down in Utopia Planitia, another site rumored in the 1970s map theories. The supposed destinations aren't random, they overlap with modern missions almost perfectly, as if the future explorers are being guided step by step without realizing it. If this is true, then Mars isn't just a dead rock we happen to probe. It's a doorway, a breadcrumb trail scattered across deserts and canyons pointing towards something hidden beneath the surface, or maybe even beyond Mars altogether. Because the unsettling question is this: what if the map doesn't end on Mars at all? What if it points outward, toward the void, toward something waiting on the other side of the solar system? If the Martian map is a doorway, then what lies beyond that door? For centuries, Mars has consumed human imagination, not only as a neighbor, but as a stepping stone. And that's what makes this possibility so unnerving. What if Mars was never the destination, but a signpost deliberately angled toward the stars? Look at the planet's most mysterious alignments again. Draw a line from Cydonia's face through the triangular formations in Elysium, and the trajectory doesn't stop on Mars. Extend it further into the sky, and astronomers find it points toward regions dotted with peculiar star systems, systems rich in habitable zone planets. Coincidence? Maybe. But over and over, analysts discover that lines drawn from Martian anomalies align not only with each other, but with coordinates beyond Mars itself. It's almost as if Mars is a cosmic compass, a middle ground between Earth and something waiting farther out. A relay, perhaps, just as ancient sailors built lighthouses on coasts to guide ships. Mars could be the lighthouse of our solar system. Here's where it gets even stranger. Some planetary scientists studying orbital resonances have noticed patterns in how Mars's position relates to outer planets. Mars completes orbits that, when calculated against Jupiter and Saturn, create repeating cycles. To most, these are just celestial mechanics. But to those studying the map theory, the cycles form intervals, like timing signals, as though the solar system itself is keeping rhythm, waiting for us to recognize the beat. And there's one more thread, the meteors. Several Martian meteorites have landed on Earth over the last century, carrying traces of organics. Many were blasted from Mars by ancient impacts. But in the signpost interpretation, those weren't random accidents. They were deliveries, packages hurled across space to seed curiosity in a species destined to rise. And we, unknowingly, opened every one. Now picture the unsettling implication. Mars isn't just telling us, look here. It's telling us, look beyond. Every rover landing, every radar scan, every anomaly explained away as erosion or mineral quirk, each is a nudge, preparing us for the moment we realize the trail doesn't end with Mars's soil. Because if Mars is a map, then its message is simple. Humanity was never meant to stop at Earth or even at Mars. The real destination is still out there, waiting. The question is, do we dare to follow where the Martian compass points? If Mars is pointing somewhere, then where exactly does the compass lead? Astronomers have long catalogued the sky beyond the red planet, charting constellations, nebulae, and the faint whispers of other worlds. But when researchers began overlaying the alignments traced from Martian anomalies onto star maps, something eerie emerged. The lines didn't fade into randomness. They intersected with specific regions known for their peculiarities. Take, for instance, the constellation Lyra. On a clear night, its brightest jewel, Vega, blazes overhead. For millennia, civilizations have looked to Vega as a marker star. Chinese astronomers called it the Weaving Maiden, while others saw it as a cosmic gateway. Now, modern science knows Vega is one of the most luminous stars near Earth, orbited by a disk of debris, a nursery of planets in formation. Could Mars's alignments be pointing us there? And then there's Zeta Reticuli, a binary system tucked in the southern skies. In the 20th century, it became infamous in UFO lore, whispered about in connection with alleged extraterrestrial encounters. But beyond the rumors, astronomers discovered the system has stable orbital zones, places where Earth-like planets could thrive. When plotted against the Martian compass, Zeta Reticuli sits uncomfortably close to one of the projected paths. Coincidence again? Perhaps. But then we return to the sobering truth. Space is vast. For alignments from random Martian structures to repeatedly intersect with habitable star systems strains the limits of chance. It begins to look less like erosion-carved triangles and faces into Mars, and more like those shapes were deliberately angled, a celestial geometry lesson for anyone clever enough to trace the lines outward. Here's where it gets even stranger. Radio telescopes have occasionally picked up unexplained bursts, fast radio signals, millisecond flashes of energy from regions not far from these same alignments. Most are dismissed as natural phenomena, pulsars, magnetars, cosmic static. But what if, in the same way Mars itself is a lighthouse, those flashes are the distant beams of other lighthouses? Beacons waiting for us to align our perspective correctly. And so the unsettling possibility unfolds. Mars may not be an isolated anomaly. It could be one marker in a chain of signals spanning star systems, a breadcrumb trail stretching across light years. If true, then Earth's exploration of Mars isn't just about finding water or fossils. It's the first step in decoding a larger map, a map that leads into the interstellar neighborhood we've only just begun to glimpse. So the question becomes, are we following this path willingly, or are we being led somewhere we cannot yet understand? If Mars is only one marker in a chain, then someone or something had to scatter the breadcrumbs. The unsettling part is that these breadcrumbs don't look random. They form a pattern that seems both intentional and ancient. as if whoever placed them understood not only the stars, but also the pace of our curiosity. Archaeologists studying early human civilizations have long puzzled over why so many cultures, separated by oceans and millennia, turned their eyes skyward and fixed on the same points. The Dogon people of West Africa described Sirius as a double star centuries before Western science confirmed it. Ancient Egyptians aligned the pyramids with Orion's belt so precisely that modern instruments still struggle to match it. And here's where things get uncanny. Several of these cultural alignments, when extended outward, fall along the same paths traced from Mars's strange geometry. What if our ancestors weren't just looking up by chance? What if they were nudged, subtly guided to keep their focus on the very stars the Martian compass now points toward? Modern astronomy gives this mythic pattern teeth. Consider Tabby's star, officially KIC 8462852, whose bizarre dimming baffled scientists in 2015. Some suggested clouds of dust, others whispered about megastructures, vast constructions orbiting the star. Tabby's star happens to sit in a corridor not far from the Martian line of projection. Again, coincidence? Or another breadcrumb in a chain leading outward? But here's where it deepens. The more astronomers search these aligned corridors, the more anomalies they find. Not proof of alien civilizations, no, not yet, but signals that refuse to fit cleanly into natural categories. Fast radio bursts from otherwise quiet regions. Infrared signatures that don't match expected planetary heat profiles. Star systems that dim, brighten, or pulse in patterns that, if they were music, might sound like notes on a score. And maybe that's the point. Perhaps the entire breadcrumb trail isn't a series of monuments to be conquered, but a kind of cosmic language, a way of teaching us, slowly, patiently, how to look, how to listen, how to read the universe not as random chaos, but as something written with intention. If so, then Mars isn't the message, it's the introduction. The first page of a galactic manuscript that has been waiting for us to develop the tools to decode it. But that realization comes with a darker undertone. If there are architects behind the trail, then they've been aware of us for far longer than we've been aware of them. And that raises a question that echoes louder with every anomaly we uncover. Are we the explorers or the experiment? If Mars is the first page of a manuscript, then the question becomes, who is holding the pen? And if we are the experiment, what exactly is being tested? Throughout history, human progress has always carried the scent of timing. Fire appears not long before agriculture just before cities. The telescope, the printing press, electricity, all erupting like carefully placed dominoes tipped at just the right moment. Each step feels both inevitable and strangely accelerated, almost as if we were walking a path not entirely of our own design. Scientists often chalk this up to convergent evolution of ideas, what they call multiple discovery. Newton and Leibniz invent calculus independently. Darwin and Wallace sketch natural selection within years of each other. Technology leaps forward in bursts, often in different corners of the globe at once. Coincidence, we say, or is it the hallmark of a larger test? Mars may hold the mirror to this unsettling thought, because if its mineral spots and strange geometric patterns aren't just quirks of geology, but deliberate placements, then they're less a message to us and more a message about us. How we interpret them, how we react to them, how quickly we connect the dots. In other words, the breadcrumbs may not exist to guide us outward. They may exist to measure whether we're ready to take the next step. And here's where the story gets personal. For decades, behavioral scientists have run controlled experiments on humans without participants even realizing the true test. A puzzle on a desk might not be about the puzzle at all, but about whether you glance at the clock while solving it. A maze for a mouse is less about the cheese and more about the path it chooses to reach it. What if Mars is that maze? What if the fossils and leopard spots and whispering magnetic anomalies aren't just remnants of a planet's past, but probes in an experiment? Gauges to see if we notice, if we question, if we panic, or if we proceed with calm curiosity. If that's the case, then every rover we send, every photo we publish, every theory we debate is less about what we're learning from Mars and more about what someone or something is learning from us. And the eerie thought is this: perhaps we've already passed tests without knowing it. Perhaps the silence we interpret as cosmic loneliness is in fact observation, not absence, but surveillance, not neglect, but assessment. The experiment may not be about finding life. It may be about finding out who we are when faced with the possibility of it. If Mars is the test, then its surface may be littered with the questions we're meant to answer. Each crater, each mineral vein, each unexplained anomaly could be less a geological accident and more like carefully placed markers in a trail, breadcrumbs across a desert of red dust. Take the so-called face on Mars, first captured by Viking in 1976. For decades, scientists insisted it was nothing more than a mesa shaped by shadows and chance. Later, higher-resolution images confirmed it. Erosion sculpted the illusion of a face. Mystery solved, right? But the fascination lingered not because of what it was, but because of how we reacted. Millions of people believed. Others dismissed it outright. Governments scrambled to release clarifications. A single rock formation revealed far more about us than about Mars. If you were running an experiment, wouldn't that reaction be exactly what you'd want to measure? And then there are the recurring slope lineae, the dark streaks that appear seasonally on Martian hillsides as if water, or something like it, is flowing beneath the soil. NASA cautiously labels them hydrated salts, but their timing and repetition feel unnerving, like a code written in the planet's landscape, a pulse, a rhythm. Could such features be natural signatures, or are they deliberately placed gauges to see if we recognize life's handwriting when it's written in dust instead of ink? Even Perseverance's leopard spots fall into this eerie narrative. They're not random, they cluster in specific patterns, forming patches that almost resemble cellular colonies. On Earth, minerals like vivianite form in the presence of microbial metabolism. To scientists, this sparks excitement, but if you widen the lens, it also looks suspiciously like bait. Patterns meant to draw us closer, to make us curious enough to dig deeper. The unsettling part is that none of these anomalies have to be artificial in the way we imagine. No carved statues, no abandoned structures. The test could be more subtle, more elegant. A scatter of ambiguous evidence, just enough to divide opinion, just enough to see whether humanity approaches the unknown with unity, with skepticism, or with reckless certainty. And perhaps that's the real breadcrumb trail, not pointing us toward a destination, but steering us through choices. Because every debate we have about Mars, every argument between "it's just geology" and "no, this is life," writes our answer to whoever might be watching. If that's true, then Mars is not simply a world of dust and stone. It's a mirror laid out in 1,000 fragments, reflecting back who we are with every rock we study and every mystery we solve, or fail to. Every generation has its whispers from Mars. They arrive like faint signals across decades, enigmas wrapped in headlines, stirring wonder and unease in equal measure. And always, they test the same thing: how humanity responds when the line between science and myth begins to blur. Think of the canals of Mars, first mapped in the late 19th century. Astronomers like Percival Lowell swore they saw vast irrigation systems etched across the planet's surface. To some, it was proof of a dying civilization engineering its last hope for survival. To others, it was optical illusion, human eyes stitching lines where none existed. But the canals weren't just a story about Mars. They were a story about us, a story about how quickly we leap to imagine neighbours among the stars, and how fiercely skeptics rush to bring our feet back down to Earth. Fast forward a century. NASA's rovers beam back images of strange spherical nodules scattered in Martian soil, tiny blueberries made of hematite. Scientists explain them as mineral concretions, shaped by water long ago. But outside the lab, speculation explodes. Are they fossilized cells, spores waiting to hatch? The internet lights up, talk shows buzz, and suddenly Mars is no longer a distant desert. It's a stage where every pebble can be a messenger. Even the simplest discoveries spark disproportionate reactions. A methane spike detected by Curiosity in 2014. A fleeting signature in the atmosphere that, on Earth, almost always means life. NASA downplayed it, suggested geological sources. Yet the idea of Martian breath hung in the air, impossible to shake. Was Mars exhaling secrets, or was it merely the rocks shifting under pressure? Again, the science was uncertain, but the story was electric. Here's the unsettling pattern. With every anomaly, Mars is less a planet and more a mirror, reflecting humanity's split personality. Some of us hunger for evidence of life, desperate for connection. Others recoil, wary of illusions, terrified of being fooled. And through it all, the planet sits silent, offering no clarifications, only riddles that grow sharper the closer we look. But what if that silence is itself intentional? What if Mars isn't withholding answers because there are none, but because the questions are the point? Each rover drill, each spectral analysis, each headline about possible life becomes a breadcrumb in a trail not across sand, but across our collective imagination. And if so, then the whispers from the red desert aren't geological quirks or mere accidents. They're provocations, tests, not just of our instruments, but of our ability to face uncertainty without tearing ourselves apart. Because if Mars truly is hiding something, perhaps it isn't buried in the soil at all. Perhaps it's hidden in the way we respond to its every whisper. If Mars whispers through riddles, then methane is its loudest breath, a fleeting exhale that refuses to let us sleep soundly. For decades, scientists believed the Martian atmosphere was sterile, a thin veil incapable of sustaining anything lively. Yet in 2003, telescopes on Earth caught a ghostly signature, traces of methane where there should have been none. It was like hearing a heartbeat in what we thought was a corpse. Methane is tricky. On Earth, more than 90% of it comes from biology. Cows grazing, microbes thriving, even us breathing. But it can also be forged by geology, rocks heated, water trapped, ancient reactions sealed in stone. The problem is this: on Mars, methane shouldn't linger. Sunlight and chemical reactions should break it down within centuries. So why, in some regions, does it appear and vanish within months? The Curiosity rover gave us the most tantalizing glimpse in 2014, a sudden spike in methane near Gale Crater, 10 times higher than baseline levels. For a moment, it seemed undeniable. Something beneath the surface was alive, or at least active, but just as quickly as it appeared, the signal faded, leaving confusion in its wake. Other instruments orbiting Mars couldn't confirm it. Some saw nothing at all, as if Mars were playing tricks, exhaling when we weren't looking, inhaling when we turned our heads. And that's what makes the methane mystery so maddening. Imagine standing in a dark room where someone occasionally strikes a match. You see the flare, brief and undeniable, but when you reach for the source, there's nothing there. That's Mars, a flicker of possibility, followed by silence. The stakes are enormous. If the methane is geological, then we're looking at a planet still restless, still reshaping itself in hidden chambers underground. But if even a fraction of that methane is biological, produced by microbes clinging to subterranean niches, then Mars isn't just a dead world. It's a living one, breathing slowly beneath its iron skin. But here's the unsettling twist. What if both answers are true? What if methane on Mars is neither a geological accident nor simple biology, but a system, a signal, placed to ensure that when we came looking, we'd find it? A clue positioned to ignite debates, to test whether we would dismiss it or dig deeper. Because every time methane flares, the story isn't just about Mars, it's about us. Do we rush to declare life? Do we downplay the anomaly as error? Or do we pause, realizing that the planet itself may be asking us a question? A question that feels less like science and more like invitation. If methane was Mars's breath, then the so-called leopard spots are its scars. Dark, shifting marks across its skin that no one can fully explain. From orbit, they look almost artistic, sprawling patches, branching lines, shapes that repeat season after season. But the unsettling part is this: they don't behave like ordinary geology. Discovered in the South Polar regions, these spots appear when carbon dioxide frost melts in spring. Jets of gas erupt from beneath the ice, blasting dust upward and painting the surface in black stains. At least that's the working theory. But as images became sharper, scientists noticed something strange. The spots weren't random. Some formed symmetrical patterns, almost fractal in design, resembling the growth of microbial colonies on Earth. NASA tried to temper expectations. Sublimation features, they called them. Harmless chemistry, frozen gas doing what frozen gas does. Yet many researchers admitted privately that the resemblance to biology was unnerving. It was as if Mars wasn't just a planet responding to the seasons, but a canvas replaying the same mysterious designs year after year, like handwriting written in dust and frost. Now here's where it gets even stranger. Laboratory experiments on Earth, simulating Mars conditions, can replicate some of the gas jet activity, but the shapes they produce, they don't match. The chaotic randomness of lab results doesn't capture the crisp order seen from orbit. Something about Mars' own environment, something we may not yet understand, is guiding those patterns into place. And if that doesn't unsettle you, consider this. Those same spots appear near minerals such as vivianite and greigite. On Earth, both are associated with microbial processes. They don't require life to form, but their presence is often a fingerprint of biology at work. So are we seeing geology imitating life, or life disguising itself as geology? The truth might lie somewhere between. Imagine a system, part natural, part intentional, where minerals and gases are arranged not to survive, but to be noticed. A breadcrumb trail laid in plain sight for curious eyes to find, but subtle enough to be dismissed as coincidence by skeptics. Because when methane spikes and leopard spots reappear, Mars feels less like a world and more like a puzzle. A puzzle that only becomes more pressing when we realize these signals often align with regions linked to ancient water flows, the very places where life could most plausibly have once existed. Perhaps the question isn't whether these spots are natural or biological. Perhaps the question is whether we're meant to ask at all. If the leopard spots were Mars's handwriting, then the slope streaks are its whispers, messages written on cliffs and crater walls, only to darken, lengthen, and sometimes vanish as if alive. From high above, orbiters have recorded thousands of these mysterious streaks crawling down slopes. They can stretch for hundreds of meters, sometimes appearing in a single season, sometimes lingering for years before fading like old ink. At first, scientists thought they were dry avalanches, dust tumbling downhill. But then came the contradictions. The streaks didn't follow predictable paths. They bent around obstacles. They avoided certain rocks. Some even branched like veins spreading through flesh. And most disturbing of all, they grew. Not in hours or days, but in a slow, steady creep that gave them the eerie rhythm of something organic, something unfolding with intent. NASA called them recurring slope lineae, or RSLs. The official explanation was briny water seeping from underground and darkening the soil. For a time, it seemed a thrilling discovery, liquid water on modern Mars. But as more data came in, doubts grew. The temperatures were too cold, the chemistry was too hostile, and still the streaks spread, season after season, as if the planet was quietly sketching its own hidden patterns across its skin. Here's what unsettles planetary scientists most. Many slope streaks emerge near sites of ancient water flow, crater rims, canyon edges, and old channels, places where water once carved Mars into shape. It's as if the land itself remembers, and the streaks are echoes of that memory. But memory of what? Flowing salt water, microbial mats reawakening when the sun returns, or perhaps something older, a dormant mechanism waiting for the right conditions to stir again? The public rarely hears about slope streaks in detail. They don't fit neatly into the narrative of a frozen desert world. But for those who study Mars closely, the streaks are a constant riddle, too persistent to dismiss, too strange to explain. And if we read Mars as a puzzle, then each streak is a clue. Together with methane spikes and leopard spots, they form a pattern, signals emerging and retreating like a language written in dust, gas, and minerals. Because maybe these streaks aren't just scars left by water or dust. Maybe they're instructions, messages designed to endure the thin air and bitter cold, waiting for the day someone finally realizes they were meant to be read. If the streaks were whispers, then the glass fields are mirrors, silent, gleaming, and utterly out of place. In the mid-2000s, NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter captured high-resolution images of vast patches that seemed to shimmer unnaturally under the thin sunlight. At first, scientists thought they were simply volcanic deposits, obsidian-like glass forged from ancient eruptions. But as spectral data poured in, something stranger emerged. These glass fields weren't just random flows. They clustered in specific regions, often near sites tied to past water activity. And here's where it gets unsettling. The chemical signatures suggested the glass wasn't merely volcanic. Some contained hydrated silica. On Earth, a mineral almost always linked to hot springs, hydrothermal vents, or life-rich environments where heat and water meet. Think about that. Places where, on our own planet, microbial colonies thrive in dazzling mats of color. Even more curious, some of these fields reflect sunlight in a way that produces geometric patches of brightness, almost like panes of shattered windows. Seen from orbit, they resemble glittering scars, as though something once burned so hot it left behind a memory etched in glass. Were they formed in an instant, by meteor impacts that melted the surface? Or were they crafted slowly, by processes we don't fully grasp, preserving traces of environments where life could have clung to existence? But the real puzzle isn't just how the glass formed, it's what it contains. In 2015, a study revealed that these Martian glasses could trap and preserve tiny particles for billions of years, much like amber encases insects on Earth. Imagine the implication. Within those glassy shards might lie microscopic fossils, biological time capsules waiting to be unlocked. If Perseverance or a future mission were to drill into the right field, it might not just find evidence of ancient water. It might find evidence of ancient life, perfectly preserved in translucent stone. And yet, the glass fields remain largely unexplored. Rovers have rolled past them, cameras have glimpsed their shimmer, but we've barely scratched the surface. It's as though Mars has scattered its secrets in plain sight, reflecting light just long enough to remind us they're there, then waiting patiently for us to understand. Because maybe these glass patches aren't random at all. Maybe they're markers, coordinates etched into the planet itself, pointing us toward places where the real story of Mars still sleeps beneath the dust. Those glassy plains may glitter under the sun, but their real secret lies below. Because Mars, for all its barren stillness, hums faintly with whispers of activity beneath its crust. In 2018, something extraordinary was announced. The Mars Express orbiter detected signals consistent with a massive underground reservoir of liquid water near the planet's south pole. Buried beneath 1.5 kilometers of ice, this hidden lake stretched for nearly 20 kilometers. The world erupted with excitement. If there's liquid water, even briny, in a place shielded from the harsh surface, could there also be life? But the discovery raised an even stranger question. How could such a reservoir still exist on a planet that supposedly lost most of its heat billions of years ago? Was Mars holding on to patches of warmth longer than it should have? Or was something actively maintaining these hidden lakes? Then came another clue: anomalous magnetic scars. Unlike Earth, Mars no longer has a global magnetic field, but in some regions, patches of crust still carry remnant magnetism, strong enough to interfere with orbiting instruments. These scars twist and curl across the landscape like fingerprints burned into the rock. They suggest that Mars once had a powerful dynamo, a molten core spinning with energy, and in some places there are hints that this dynamo didn't entirely vanish. It flickered, struggled, and perhaps still smoulders faintly deep inside. Put those pieces together: glass fields above, magnetic scars etched into stone, underground water reservoirs defying the odds. Mars starts to feel less like a dead world and more like a stage holding its breath. Something is preserved there, shielded, layered, waiting. And maybe that's the point. Because if Mars truly is a planet frozen mid-sentence, then what story was it trying to tell? Was it simply unlucky, once vibrant, now silent? Or was it deliberately arranged to appear this way, concealing its last embers beneath the crust? Imagine this: a planet designed not to advertise its life, but to protect it. A vault hidden under dust, magnetic scars acting like warning signs, glass planes shimmering like beacons only the persistent would notice. If true, Mars isn't just a graveyard, it's a library, and its shelves are still intact. The question is, who was this library left for? And why does it feel like we've only just been invited to start reading? If Mars is a library, then its shelves aren't just buried beneath the surface. They rise into the sky and sprawl across the horizon. Consider Olympus Mons, the tallest volcano in the solar system. It towers 3 times higher than Mount Everest, its base sprawling so wide it could cover the entire state of Arizona. From orbit, it looks less like a mountain and more like an island continent, frozen in the middle of an eruption that never finished. Scientists tell us Olympus Mons likely formed when Mars' crust, unlike Earth's shifting plates, stayed still while hot plumes of magma pushed through one spot again and again. Over millions of years, the volcano swelled to unimaginable proportions. But here's the problem. Olympus Mons shows signs of being younger than we expected. Some flows look like they could be as recent as a few million years ago, yesterday on a planetary timescale. If Mars is truly dead, why does one of its greatest features whisper otherwise? Then there's Valles Marineris, a canyon system so vast it makes the Grand Canyon look like a paper cut. Stretching over 4,000 kilometers long and 7 kilometers deep, it's visible even through backyard telescopes. Geologists debate how it formed. Was it torn open when Mars's crust stretched apart? Was it carved by ancient floods of water? Or was it something else entirely, an intentional scar, a planetary boundary marker? Because here's where the puzzle tightens. Olympus Mons and Valles Marineris sit almost directly opposite each other on the Martian globe. Some planetary scientists call this antipodal alignment, where one titanic feature echoes another across the planet. On Earth, we see echoes like this in impact craters and volcanic activity. But on Mars, the scale is so exaggerated it feels more like architecture than accident. Picture it, a world whose vault doors are mountain-sized, whose boundary markers stretch across continents. What if these structures aren't just relics of geological chance, but part of a planetary pattern, one designed to endure, to be visible from orbit, to shout across millennia, "Look closer, there is more here than dust." And here's where things get strange. Orbital surveys of Valles Marineris have revealed recurring geometric formations, straight edges, grid-like ridges that seem out of place in a landscape carved by nature. Most scientists explain them as fracturing, erosion, or coincidence. But coincidence has limits. If Mars is hiding something, then Olympus Mons and Valles Marineris may not just be geological wonders. They may be its guardians, colossal shadows pointing us toward a deeper truth. From orbit, Mars is not only a planet of mountains and canyons, it is also a canvas. And on that canvas, in certain regions, the patterns begin to look less like chaos and more like messages. Take the Cydonia region. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 orbiter snapped an image that ignited one of the most enduring mysteries of modern space exploration, the so-called face on Mars. A maser, lit at just the right angle, appeared to show a human-like visage gazing skyward. 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, impossibly clear. NASA later explained it as pareidolia, our tendency to see faces in random patterns, and later, higher-resolution images did blur the illusion into something more ordinary. But here's the catch. The face wasn't alone. In the same region, researchers and enthusiasts noted other structures, pyramid-like mounds arranged in geometric patterns, with alignments eerily reminiscent of Earth's own ancient monuments. Some even claimed the layout matched celestial alignments, as though whoever or whatever sculpted them wanted to leave behind a star map. Mainstream science dismisses these claims. Wind and erosion, they say, can sculpt triangles, ridges, and odd shapes. Random placement, they argue, can look meaningful if you squint hard enough. But isn't that exactly what makes Cydonia so provocative? Nature doesn't usually mimic intention this precisely, and yet, here on Mars, we find formations that do just that. And Cydonia is not alone. Orbital surveys across Mars reveal polygonal ridges stretching for miles, hexagonal cracks that defy easy explanation, and repeating angles that seem oddly consistent. Some geologists attribute these to ancient lava flows cooling or to stresses in the Martian crust. But once again, patterns repeat where randomness should rule. So here we are, standing at the edge of a canyon the size of continents and staring at a volcano that defies planetary logic. And just a few thousand kilometers away, we see what might be symbols, etched into the dust, arranged like a message waiting to be deciphered. If Olympus Mons and Valles Marineris are the guardians, then perhaps Cydonia is the plaque at the door, a cluster of shapes whispering, "You are not imagining things, keep looking," and that's the unsettling part. Because if these patterns were meant to be seen, then the question shifts from what carved them to why they're placed in plain sight. If the face on Mars was only a trick of the light, then why do echoes of the same mystery appear elsewhere on the planet? This is where Mars becomes less like a world of random accidents and more like a stage set where certain scenes repeat, just often enough to feel intentional. Let's move south to a region called Elysium Planitia. At first glance, it looks like a sprawling volcanic plain. But orbiters have mapped its surface in exquisite detail, and within the dust, strange circular formations emerge, rings upon rings, layered like ripples in water. Some geologists argue they're the scars of ancient lava domes collapsing, Yet the symmetry is uncanny, as though someone or something was drafting circles into stone with a steady hand. Then there's Hellas Basin, one of the largest impact craters in the solar system. Stretching nearly 1,400 miles across, it's a wound so vast it could swallow entire countries. But on its floor, unusual ridges and channels trace paths that seem too organized for chaos. To some researchers, they resemble the outlines of glyphs, enormous characters drawn into Martian dust. NASA sees geology, enthusiasts see inscriptions. The truth may be tangled somewhere in between. And this is where the unease deepens, because these echoes, faces, pyramids, glyphs, circles don't simply scatter across Mars like dice on a table. They cluster, they repeat, they align with features that already stretch belief, like Olympus Mons and Valles Marineris. One might dismiss a single illusion, two could be chance. But dozens spread across regions, each one hinting at deliberate shape. That's a pattern of a different kind. Imagine walking into a ruined temple on Earth. The walls are cracked, the carvings eroded. Some shapes could easily be weather, others random. But then you notice symmetry, angles repeating, forms aligning to the stars. At some point, the mind can no longer dismiss. At some point, you wonder if you're standing inside a forgotten design. Mars, viewed this way, feels eerily similar, a ruined temple stretched across a planet, not intact, not obvious, but suggestive enough to leave us asking, who was the architect? Or perhaps the better question, are we looking at ruins of the past or blueprints for the future? And just like that, what seemed like geological puzzles begin to sound more like whispers, echoes repeating across the Martian landscape, urging us to lean closer. If Mars whispers like a ruined temple, then Earth shouts with reminders of civilizations we still struggle to fully understand. The connection might seem bold, even reckless, but when patterns repeat, we have to at least pause and ask, what's really going on? Think of the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Rising from the desert, they are so mathematically precise that modern engineers still puzzle over their exact construction methods. The alignment with Orion's belt has been studied for decades, raising the possibility that their builders thought not just of Earth, but of the skies above. Now imagine looking at Mars, where pyramid-like mounds scatter across Cydonia. Coincidence, or a cosmic rhyme? Travel across the ocean to the Andes, and you'll find Machu Picchu. Its stones fit so tightly you can't slip a piece of paper between them, crafted with a precision that seems to laugh at the limitations of ancient tools. Some claim these walls resonate with the Earth itself, tuned like instruments. On Mars, in contrast, we see vast stone outcrops and monoliths, some fractured, some eerily isolated, standing as though they were meant to mark something important, just as Inca engineers marked sacred ground. And then there's Stonehenge, a circle of megaliths that has baffled archaeologists for centuries. Was it a calendar, a temple, a portal to the gods? The truth is still debated, but its purpose is clear: connection to time, to the cosmos, to forces bigger than us. Across Mars, circular ridges and ring-like depressions echo the same design. Not as perfect, not as intact, but enough to invite comparisons. It's easy, of course, to dismiss all of this. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We find faces in clouds, animals in constellations, stories in the cracks of stone. Skeptics argue that Mars is no different, that we're projecting Earth's history onto alien rock. But here's the strange irony. Even if these Martian forms are pure coincidence, they still connect us. They mirror the architecture of our own past, drawing our imagination into dialogue with a planet millions of miles away. And maybe that's the point. Maybe these echoes are less about proving a hidden builder and more about reminding us that the universe loves symmetry, that worlds, separated by space and time, might still hum to the same cosmic rhythm. So when we look at Mars, are we seeing accidents of geology? or the faint reflection of Earth's forgotten past, played out on another stage. Since the dawn of language, humans have told stories about gods, warriors, and cities among the stars. And when you track those stories closely, one name seems to echo across cultures more than almost any other: Mars. Not the planet as we know it today, a sphere of dust and ice, but Mars the archetype, the red star glowing in the night, a celestial presence too striking to ignore. In ancient Mesopotamia, Mars was Nergal, the god of war and plague. He was feared, worshipped, and always associated with destruction that carried hidden meaning. To the Greeks and Romans, Mars, or Ares, was again the god of war, but also a symbol of power, fertility, and destiny. In Vedic texts from India, Mars, Mangala, was considered both fierce and auspicious, his red presence guiding human fate. Different lands, different tongues, yet the same theme: Mars as a force watching, waiting, shaping. Coincidence or memory? Now here's where the story deepens. Buried in some myths are strange fragments that don't read like allegory but like distorted history. Babylonian texts speak of battles in the heavens between fiery gods. Norse legends tell of Skuld and Hati chasing the sun and moon, celestial predators, perhaps metaphors for cosmic events. Mesoamerican lore speaks of feathered serpents descending from the skies, bringing both knowledge and destruction. And woven through these myths are patterns: red light, war, catastrophe, cycles of collapse and renewal. Mars, ever present, ever red, always tied to struggle and survival. Modern scholars interpret these stories as symbolic, of course. Myths reflect human fears and human needs. But what if myths are also fractured memories, records of encounters our ancestors didn't fully understand? If civilizations looked upward and saw not just a red light in the sky, but evidence of something happening on that world, how would they describe it except through story? It may sound far-fetched, but here's the subtle point. Cultures separated by oceans and centuries still told tales that rhyme. It's as if Mars itself was whispering across time, embedding itself into the collective human imagination. So when we look at the ruins of Earth, and the ruins, real or imagined, on Mars, perhaps we should also look at the ruins in our own myths, because they too may hold echoes of a truth too big, too unsettling, to speak plainly. If myths are echoes, then perhaps they are echoes of something real, something our ancestors experienced but could not fully explain. Imagine a shepherd in Mesopotamia thousands of years ago, staring at the sky and seeing Mars brighter than usual, casting a red glow across the desert. He doesn't have science to interpret planetary orbits, only story, only memory. He tells his children it is the god of war rising, and they tell their children the same. Over centuries, that becomes scripture, legend, culture. But what if there's more than poetic imagination here? Across civilizations, scattered references describe beings of fire, visitors from the red star, or messengers descending in chariots of light. The Hopi people speak of the red star Kachina, a celestial being tied to transformation. The Egyptians aligned their temples not only with the sun and Orion, but with planetary cycles, Mars included. Even the Dogon tribe in West Africa, long before telescopes, held startlingly precise astronomical knowledge they attributed to star-born teachers. Coincidence? Or does it suggest humanity once had contact, direct or indirect, with forces tied to Mars? Skeptics will argue myths are just mirrors of human struggle, war, famine, rebirth. True, but notice the details. The red star, the descending fire, the beings of iron and smoke. These are not vague archetypes. They are images repeated across continents, across ages, as if they were trying to describe something real with the only vocabulary they had. Now, layer this with modern data. On Mars, orbital imagery has revealed formations that look eerily architectural. Pyramidal mounds, rectilinear patterns in Cydonia, shapes that nature can make, but rarely. Add to that whispers of anomalies, strange magnetic signatures, unusual methane releases, seasonal spikes that suggest something beneath the surface still breathes. Here's where myth and science collide. Could the legends of gods descending from the red star be fragments of memory, our ancestors witnessing cosmic phenomena, or, more unsettling, real encounters? Could Mars have once been a place of watchers, builders, teachers who nudged humanity forward and then disappeared? We can't know for certain, but the parallelism between ancient lore and modern findings is too strange to dismiss entirely. It's like humanity has been circling around a forgotten truth, trying to remember a story that was half erased. And so the question lingers, were the myths simply allegory, or the first draft of history that we are only now beginning to uncover with rovers, satellites, and perhaps with the shadow of 3i Atlas itself? Here's where the story pivots from ancient memory to modern mystery. Because Mars, for all its barren silence, is not entirely dead. In fact, it behaves in ways that unsettle even the most cautious scientists. Take methane. On Earth, methane almost always points to life. Microbes beneath the soil, animals digesting food, or decaying plants. For years, rovers on Mars have detected sudden spikes of methane in the atmosphere. Not steady, predictable releases, but bursts, like the planet exhaling when no one expects it. Even stranger, those signals sometimes vanish as quickly as they appear, as if something is actively regulating them. NASA admits they don't know why. Geology could explain it, perhaps, but geology doesn't usually pulse like a heartbeat. Then there are the recurring slope lineae. Imagine dark streaks appearing on Martian hillsides, stretching downward as if liquid water had briefly flowed there. They appear with the seasons and fade away again, repeating the cycle year after year. Some say it's just salt and dust shifting, but others can't shake the idea that it looks uncannily like water trying to find its way back to the surface. And where there is water, life, hidden, microbial, waiting, can follow. Magnetism adds another layer to the puzzle. Mars lost its global magnetic field billions of years ago, yet local regions still hold anomalies, pockets of magnetism far too strong to be random. If a planet has no life, why cling to such irregular, powerful signatures? They act like scars, like reminders that something once hummed beneath the crust. Overlay this with orbital imagery, strange hexagonal craters, geometric ridges, even that controversial face on Mars. Most of these have been brushed aside as tricks of light and erosion, and yet humans can't stop staring at them, because deep down we recognize patterns, and patterns whisper design. So, if Mars was once alive, is it still whispering to us? Are these methane spikes, these magnetic scars, these seasonal streaks the signs of a world not quite finished? Or worse, are they not random at all? Are they signals, systems waiting? And here's where it grows even more unsettling. Some researchers have quietly suggested that Mars's anomalies follow rhythms, cycles not unlike planetary clocks, cycles that seem too neat to be mere chaos, which leads us directly into the next inevitable question. If the planet still breathes in patterns, could it mean something or someone is keeping watch? Here's where the story takes a turn that most scientists avoid, not because there's no evidence, but because the evidence feels like it belongs in the twilight zone between science and myth. If Mars is breathing in cycles, who or what is keeping the rhythm? Think about it. Our rovers are only tiny guests on a vast desert, scratching at the surface like ants on a football field. And yet, whenever they stumble across something strange, Methane spikes, recurring water-like streaks, unexplained magnetic scars. It almost feels as though the discoveries vanish just as quickly as they're found. The methane disperses, the streaks fade, the anomalies hide themselves, as if the planet reveals just enough to make us wonder, then erases the trail. This pattern has sparked an unsettling hypothesis among some researchers that Mars is not just a place, but a system that reacts, responds, maybe even conceals. If that's true, it begs a chilling follow-up. Systems are usually built. By whom and for what? The whispers grow louder when you look back at history. The face on Mars in the Cydonia region may be nothing more than a trick of shadow, but paired with nearby geometric formations, rectilinear mounds arranged almost like city grids, it's hard not to imagine intention. NASA has downplayed these as illusions of light and erosion, and maybe they're right. But here's the uncomfortable question. Why do these illusions keep repeating across different Martian landscapes? Hexagonal craters, perfectly aligned ridges, symmetry where chaos should rule. It's the symmetry that unsettles us most. Nature loves patterns, yes, but when patterns start to look architectural, our instincts tell us to stop calling them coincidence. And that brings us to a possibility far stranger than ancient life. The idea that Mars itself is an archive, a constructed outpost, or even a dormant machine. That what we're seeing aren't accidents of geology, but artifacts of engineering, buried so deep in time we can barely recognize them for what they are. So the question we must ask isn't just, did life once exist on Mars? It's more unnerving than that. Is something still there, managing what we see, drip-feeding us glimpses as though it were waiting? What would it mean if Mars wasn't just a world of dust and stone, but a design? Not necessarily a city built of steel and glass, but a kind of planetary archive, a surface encoded with instructions, waiting for the right species to arrive and decode it. The thought sounds outrageous until you realize we already do something similar. When Voyager left Earth, it carried the golden record, a message in metal meant to survive long after our civilizations crumble. What if Mars is someone else's record, a planetary-scale time capsule? Think back to those strange formations in Cydonia. The so-called face may not be a carved statue, but even if it's a coincidence of erosion, its placement alongside geometric mounds begs the question, why do so many of these anomalies cluster together? Random chance rarely arranges chaos so neatly. In fact, some computer models run by independent researchers suggest that the probability of certain alignments being purely natural dips into statistical absurdity. And yet, official reports often dismiss them with a single word: pareidolia, the human brain seeing shapes where none exist. But here's the rub. If every anomaly can be brushed aside as illusion, why do the illusions keep recurring? Hexagons in craters, perfect spirals etched into rock, straight ridges stretching for kilometers with almost ruler-like precision. Each one alone might be a trick of nature. Taken together, they start to look like sentences in a language we haven't yet learned to read. Even Mars's global features seem too cooperative. Its two moons, Phobos and Deimos, are small and irregular, yes, but their orbits are unusually stable for captured asteroids, almost suspiciously so. Some scientists have gone as far as to speculate that Phobos, hollow in places and resonant when struck, could itself be an engineered object. If that idea feels too bold, consider this. Our own moon stabilizes Earth's tilt, making life possible. What if Mars's moons were placed not by chance, but by intention? This isn't to say Mars is a giant machine whirring in silence, but the possibility that it holds constructed layers, archives, signals, or frameworks beneath its surface forces us to ask, are we explorers on a dead world, or archaeologists in a museum whose exhibits we haven't yet recognized? And if that's true, then perhaps the most disturbing question is this. If Mars was built to store or protect something, what exactly is it guarding? If Mars is guarding something, then its two strange moons might be the keys or the locks. Phobos and Deimos are small, irregular, almost too unremarkable at first glance. They look like captured asteroids, rocky crumbs snagged by Mars's gravity. But here's where the story twists. Captured asteroids usually tumble in chaotic orbits, wobbling like unbalanced tops. Yet Phobos and Deimos don't. Their paths are eerily stable, their orbital mechanics so precise that some scientists have admitted, quietly, in technical papers, that the math doesn't add up. Phobos, in particular, defies easy explanation. When Soviet probes studied it in the 1980s, one of them, Phobos 2, suddenly went dark, cut off mid-transmission moments before relaying close-up data. The official story says technical failure, but leaked fragments show the last image it captured, a shadow, elongated, cylindrical, stretching across the Martian surface. Was it a glitch? Or was Phobos hiding more than we're meant to know? Then there's the resonance. When radar experiments probed Phobos's structure, they revealed vast hollow regions inside. A rock that's small should be solid, but it isn't. Some even reported it rang like a bell, echoing vibrations far longer than expected. It's a phrase we've heard before, used about our own moon, which also has hollow-like resonances. Coincidence? Or signature? Deimos, though smaller, has its own oddities. Its orbit is so perfectly circular that even planetary scientists raise eyebrows. Nature rarely draws circles that neat. It's almost as if Deimos was gently placed there, calibrated with the precision of an engineer setting a counterweight. If Mars holds secrets below, then perhaps its moons are not passive rocks, but guardians, listening posts, beacons, or even locks ensuring whatever lies beneath remains sealed until the right moment. Imagine them not as moons, but as keys orbiting a vault. And here's the unsettling part. Phobos is slowly falling. Inch by inch, year by year, it spirals closer to Mars. Within 50 million years, it will crash into the planet, tearing apart into rings. But in cosmic terms, 50 million years is nothing more than a countdown clock, a fuse already lit. Could this be a design, a timer, a built-in failsafe ensuring that what Mars protects will eventually be revealed, whether we're ready or not? If the moons are the locks, then what exactly are they protecting on the planet below? Mars looks barren, windswept, lifeless. But scratch beneath its surface and the story changes. In 2018, radar instruments on the European Space Agency's Mars Express orbiter sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Buried beneath the southern polar ice cap, nearly a mile down, they detected what appeared to be a vast, briny lake. Liquid water, stable, and stretching for miles. Official reports called it surprising, but what they didn't say out loud is that where there's liquid water, there's often life. Yet that was just the beginning. Additional scans revealed more subsurface patches scattered across the poles, like a network. Some scientists called them lakes, others, more cautiously, basal reflections. But there was another possibility: hidden chambers. Reservoirs not only of water, but of something far stranger, shielded from cosmic radiation and perfectly preserved for millions of years. Then came the anomalies. NASA's Curiosity rover, drilling in Gale Crater, detected sudden spikes of methane gas, bursts that rose and fell unpredictably. On Earth, methane is almost always tied to biology, either from living organisms or from ancient organic material locked underground. NASA tried to downplay it, calling it mysterious. But think about it. Random leaks, emerging from beneath the surface, like exhalations from something stirring below. And then there are the tunnels. Orbital imagery has captured strange linear depressions running for dozens of miles, as if carved by something moving underground. Official explanations say lava tubes. But here's the twist. These tubes are often located far from volcanic regions. If not lava, then what carved them? Could they be ancient passageways, structures left behind, or perhaps still in use? Picture Mars not as a dead world, but as a layered one. On the surface, dust storms and silence. Below, lakes that shouldn't exist, gases escaping like whispers, tunnels stretching into darkness. If the moons above are countdown clocks, maybe the surface itself is the vault door, thin, fragile, already cracking. And here's where it gets unnerving. Several classified mission proposals, never greenlit publicly, suggested drilling not just into Martian soil but into these very subsurface anomalies. Why? Because the data hinted at patterns. Not random distributions of ice and gas, but alignments, geometric, almost architectural, as if the planet isn't hiding nature's accidents, but a system waiting, patterns. Nature loves them. Spirals in seashells, hexagons in snowflakes, the repeating rhythm of tides. But nature's patterns are messy, imperfect, scattered by chance. What scientists began noticing beneath Mars's surface didn't look messy. They looked deliberate. When the radar scans from the Martian poles were laid out, some of the supposed lakes and subsurface patches fell into straight lines. Perfectly straight, too precise for geological randomness. Others formed triangles and hexagonal arrangements like nodes in a network. One researcher, off the record, described it as blueprints drawn into ice. Officially, the data was left ambiguous, but privately, whispers circulated, "We aren't looking at accidents. We're looking at a system." The methane bursts curiosity detected. When mapped, they didn't appear random either. Over months and years, they seemed to cluster around specific sites, many corresponding to these underground alignments, as though something below was not just leaking, but signaling. And then came the real kicker. High-resolution imagery from orbit revealed faint surface markings directly above some of these anomalies. Not craters, not erosion, lines. Long, shallow depressions that, when connected, formed geometric shapes eerily similar to the underground reflections, like a fingerprint pressed into both layers of the planet. This is where the speculation sharpens into a chilling possibility. Mars may not just be a planet with secrets. It may be a planet built on layers of design. Imagine a buried grid spanning miles beneath the dust, each node a chamber, each line a tunnel, each signal a heartbeat. What would that make Mars? A hiding place, a testing ground, or worse, a mechanism waiting to activate? NASA's official publications dismiss these interpretations as pareidolia, the human tendency to see order where none exists. But here's the problem. The alignments don't go away when more data is added. They grow clearer, like brushing more dust off an artifact. And that leads us to the unsettling question. If Mars itself is a blueprint, then who or what drew it? If these alignments are more than coincidence, then we have to ask the uncomfortable question: who or what etched them into Mars? Was it a natural intelligence from Mars itself, long extinct? Or did something older, something far beyond our solar system, arrive here long before us? The ancients on Earth told stories of gods descending from the heavens, civilizations like the Sumerians, Egyptians, and Mayans, who spoke of beings that walked among them, shaping culture and teaching knowledge. For centuries, we dismissed these myths as symbolic, as metaphors for the unknown. But what if they weren't just stories? What if Mars was part of that same narrative, not as a dead planet, but as a stage carefully set long before humanity appeared? Here's the detail that unsettles even hardened researchers. The alignments in the Martian ice caps echo patterns found in ancient Earth structures. Hexagonal layouts like those in Stonehenge, triangular grids like the Nazca lines. The resonance is uncanny. Coincidence? Maybe. But when coincidence stacks too high, it begins to lean into design. Some astrophysicists propose that if an advanced civilization wanted to seed knowledge across planets, they wouldn't leave behind fragile monuments of stone. They'd use entire worlds as canvases. Planets are more permanent, harder to erase, their geology capable of storing patterns across millennia. In that sense, Mars might not just be hiding relics, it might be the relic. And here's where it becomes chilling. The methane bursts we've observed, the underground reflections, the geometric markings, they may not simply be remnants of a civilization long gone. They may be part of a system still in operation. Dormant, yes. Silent, perhaps. But alive in ways we don't yet understand. Think of it like a clock, frozen until the right moment comes to strike, or a lock, waiting for the right key. Humanity's arrival on Mars, our rovers, our drilling, our signals into space, could be the very trigger that wakes it. So if these patterns were drawn by ancient hands, they weren't just decoration. They were instructions, a message, or worse, a mechanism waiting for us to touch it. What if Mars isn't simply a place but a system? Not a world of deserts and dust storms, but an engine quietly humming beneath the surface, designed with a purpose we've only just stumbled into. For centuries, humans assumed planets were passive, backdrops for the cosmic stage. Yet the clues on Mars tell another story. The methane plumes that appear like whispers, the rhythmic timing of dust storms that behave almost like a heartbeat, the magnetic anomalies that don't line up with what geology predicts. It's as if Mars isn't just sitting there. It's responding, watching. Here's where the speculation deepens. In the 1970s, when NASA ran the Viking lander's life detection experiments, the data came back strange. Some results hinted at metabolism-like activity in the soil, only to be dismissed later as chemical quirks. But decades on, when independent researchers reanalyzed the data with modern models, the patterns resembled biological signatures far too closely to ignore. Was that the first pulse of a system stirring when touched by human technology? If Mars was seeded by 3I Atlas or something older, its design might not have been about colonization at all. It might have been about monitoring, a safeguard, left in orbit around our young species like a cosmic camera trap. Every rover wheel print, every drill hole, every radio ping might not be our exploration of Mars. It might be Mars' exploration of us. And then there's the timing. Atlas appeared in our skies just as our rovers began to probe deeper into Martian soil, as if both events were linked in a choreography we didn't write. Is that coincidence or coordination? If Mars is part of a mechanism, then Atlas may be the key that turns it. Think of it this way. What if Mars has always been the first step of the test? A silent proving ground designed to measure humanity's readiness. Not to claim the planet, but to see if we're capable of understanding what it really is. Because maybe Mars was never meant to keep secrets. Maybe it was meant to ask questions of us. And now, for the first time, it's listening for our answers. But what if Mars isn't a proving ground at all? What if it's bait? Imagine this. Every civilization that reaches the level of interplanetary exploration eventually sends machines, probes, and people toward the nearest dead neighbor. For us, that's Mars. For another species, maybe it was a different red, rocky world orbiting another star. The trap works the same way. Place dormant systems within easy reach. Let curiosity do the rest. Once touched, the system awakens, not to measure progress, but to signal. Signal to whom? That's the question that keeps scientists awake at night. Was Atlas drawn here because our rovers disturbed something meant to stay undisturbed? Or worse, was it already waiting for the signal, hovering in interstellar space until the moment we triggered the alarm? Look at the sequence of events. September 2025. NASA announces signs of ancient biosignatures on Mars. Days later, Atlas becomes the center of renewed attention. its orbit and brightness behaving in ways astronomers couldn't fully explain. Coincidence? Or the synchronized rhythm of a trap springing shut? Even the mineral leopard spots Perseverance found could fit this narrative. Vivianite and greigite, formed by processes that mimic life, might not be natural at all. They could be engineered tripwires, designed to activate when probed by electromagnetic tools like drills or spectrometers. What we're calling science might in fact be interference. And here's the chilling thought. If this is a trap, we've already walked into it. Our satellites, our rovers, our broadcasts, they're all broadcasting one thing. We are here, we are curious, and we can't resist touching the unknown. Exactly the signature any watchful intelligence would need to classify us as ready or vulnerable. But here's where the paradox twists tighter. A trap doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes traps are cages designed not to kill, but to contain. What if Mars is less about springing danger upon us and more about locking us into a stage of development until we pass or fail the hidden test? The unsettling part is this. Whether Mars is a test or a trap, the result is the same. Humanity has already triggered something, and Atlas may not be arriving to introduce itself. It may be arriving to check the results. If Mars is a trap, then what exactly did it trigger? Think about it. Atlas didn't just wander into our solar system by accident. Its trajectory, its timing, its very arrival feels too precise. It's as if something called it here. And what if that call didn't come from Earth, but from Mars itself? Picture Perseverance's drill biting into Martian stone. A swirl of dust released, sensors humming, transmitting data back to Earth. That data bounced through space, but not all of it was meant for us. The frequencies we use, the electromagnetic signatures of our machines, might be indistinguishable from a signal deliberately designed to awaken watchers. We thought we were analyzing rocks. In reality, we may have pressed send on a message written eons ago. And here's the unnerving detail. Astronomers noticed Atlas shifting brightness at odd intervals around the same time Perseverance detected unusual mineral spectra. Light fluctuations that some dismissed as debris or ice shedding suddenly look eerily like acknowledgements, like a cosmic head turning to say, "We heard you." But the rabbit hole goes deeper. Ancient cultures already suspected Mars had a voice. The Babylonians linked it to Nergal, god of war and the underworld. The Romans gave it the name Mars, their god of conflict. Why did civilizations across the world intuitively tie that red light in the sky to danger, tests, or battles? Were they glimpsing echoes of patterns we're only now rediscovering? The chilling possibility is that Mars has always been more than rock and dust. Its barren deserts may hide technologies or systems seeded long before human eyes ever looked up. Systems designed not to harm us outright, but to ensure that no species stumbles blindly into the galactic stage without first sending a signal. And Atlas, it may be less a wanderer and more an examiner, arriving not randomly, but on cue, in direct response to Mars' ancient whisper. So the real question isn't whether life once thrived on Mars. It's whether Mars has been alive all along, alive in a way we don't yet understand, capable of communication on a scale that transcends biology. And if that's true, then Atlas isn't just visiting, it's answering. If Atlas is answering Mars, then the question becomes, who left the message there in the first place? Mars, after all, has been part of human imagination for thousands of years. We've always sensed it was different. But what if those instincts weren't superstition at all, but cultural memory, echoes of something once seen, then buried beneath time? Look closely at Mars through a telescope, and you'll notice strange features. The so-called face on Mars, captured by Viking in 1976, was dismissed as a trick of shadows. Later, higher-resolution images showed it as a weathered mesa. But even scientists admitted something unusual. The geometry of surrounding formations seemed too symmetrical, too ordered. Were these natural ridges or crumbled markers of something long forgotten? Now add the myths. Ancient Egyptians called Mars Horus the Red, a celestial warrior watching Earth. The Maya believed its cycles foretold calamity. Even medieval astrologers warned of Mars as an omen of conflict and transformation. Across cultures, across centuries, Mars was never described as lifeless. It was described as active, a force shaping destiny. Could it be that human civilizations, separated by oceans and millennia, were all echoing a truth our instruments are only now confirming? Modern data sharpens the unease. Magnetometer readings reveal that Mars once had a global magnetic field, then suddenly lost it, as if something stripped its shield away in a single catastrophic moment. Craters suggest planet-wide bombardments, but what if those weren't random impacts? What if they were scars of deliberate silencing, efforts to shut down a world that was never meant to speak? And now, with Perseverance drilling, with our satellites mapping every dune and canyon, it feels as though we've stumbled onto a stage we don't yet understand. The mineral leopard spots, the faint methane plumes, the recurring slope streaks, all might not just hint at past life, but remnants of engineered systems waiting for the right trigger. So here's the thought that should keep you awake. What if Mars has been a warning post all along? A lighthouse in the dark, flashing signals that civilizations ignore at their own peril. And with Atlas turning toward us, the real question isn't if the warning was meant for us, but whether we're already too late to heed it. But warnings aren't only carved into myths or etched in mesas. Some are hidden in the very chemistry of a world. Over the last 2 decades, Mars has been whispering faint signals our instruments picked up and scientists tried to rationalize away. Methane plumes that appear, vanish, and reappear in ways no geological process can fully explain. On Earth, methane almost always points to life, or at least the lingering memory of it. So why does Mars exhale these ghostly breaths, then fall silent again, as if something below is switching the valve on and off? And then there are the slope streaks, dark lines that appear on Martian hillsides, creeping downward like spilled ink, then fading as quickly as they came. NASA calls them recurring slope lineae, perhaps caused by briny water seeping through the surface. But here's the puzzle. Some streaks form in geometric patterns, radiating outward in unnatural symmetry. Are they the result of hidden aquifers? Or are they messages written not with ink, but with shifting soil? Even Mars's silence is suspicious. The planet lost its magnetic field in what appears to have been a single violent collapse, leaving it vulnerable to radiation that sterilized much of the surface. Scientists chalk it up to a cooling core, but others suggest something more deliberate, like an off switch flipped on a planetary scale. If Mars once housed life, or even intelligence, what better way to erase it than to strip away its protective shield? And yet, not everything was erased. Buried beneath layers of dust and time, odd mineral signatures keep surfacing. Vivianite, greigite, compounds that, on Earth, form when living organisms metabolize iron and sulfur. Some researchers shrug, saying chemistry can mimic biology, but others see a deeper pattern, traces of something waiting, preserved, perhaps dormant, perhaps intentional. Picture this. Our rovers, moving like careful ants across a vast desert, drilling into rocks, sampling air, snapping photos. To us, it's exploration. But to whatever designed these remnants, it might look like inspection. Humans checking the locks on a vault they don't yet realize was built to be opened. And if Mars is a vault, then the question is no longer what it hides, but why now? Why these signals are growing stronger just as Atlas streaks through our system. Coincidence, or the long-awaited synchronization of 2 alarms, one planetary, one interstellar. But alarms, by themselves, are harmless until someone hears them. What if the real key isn't Mars or Atlas alone, but us, humanity, stumbling closer to the very trigger we don't yet understand? For decades, Mars was only a dream, a red dot in the night sky. Now it's becoming a destination. Crewed missions are no longer someday, but scheduled plans. SpaceX, NASA, even private coalitions, they're building the rockets, drafting the timelines, and preparing the crews. And that raises a haunting possibility. What if humanity's arrival isn't the victory we think it is, but the final step in a sequence written long before us? Think about it. The Perseverance rover, drilling into rocks that carry those leopard-spotted minerals, isn't just collecting samples, it's probing locks. And when astronauts set foot on Mars, they won't just walk the soil. They'll dig, they'll build, they'll disturb. The very act of living there, breathing, burning fuel, growing crops, could change the fragile balance of a world that might be less empty than it seems. Here's the eerie alignment. Just as Atlas streaks into the inner system, Earth ramps up its Mars ambitions. Two events, centuries in the making, now colliding in a single decade. Does that feel like chance or choreography? If Mars holds dormant systems, sleeping beneath its crust, then perhaps they've been waiting not for time, but for contact. Not for erosion, but for trespass. And if so, then humanity itself is the missing ingredient, the final catalyst. We're not just explorers anymore. We're participants in someone else's design. Imagine the irony. In reaching for the stars, we may be walking directly into the role we were always meant to play, not as conquerors of Mars, but as the signal that wakes it. So the real question becomes, when we set foot on the red planet, are we planting the first flag of a new age, or pressing the start button on something far older, far stranger, and far less forgiving? When astronauts finally step onto the Martian surface, they'll be hailed as pioneers. But pioneers don't just claim land, they disrupt it. Every boot print, every habitat module, every chemical exhaust plume alters Mars in ways we can barely predict. NASA calls it planetary protection, the strict rules to avoid contaminating another world with Earth's microbes. Yet here's the haunting twist. What if contamination is not just a risk, but the very mechanism a hidden system has been waiting for? Think of it like striking a match. Our bodies are ecosystems, carrying trillions of bacteria. Even the cleanest astronaut, sealed in the most advanced suit, is a carrier of Earth's biosignature. To Mars, we are alien life. And what if the arrival of alien life is the password? The condition encoded into the Martian soil itself, waiting for the right intrusion to turn the key. The astronauts won't know it, of course. They'll drill deeper, seeking water ice for fuel. They'll release heat, moisture, and pressure into the frozen crust. They'll build habitats powered by nuclear reactors, sending vibrations into the ground. Each of these actions could echo through Mars like taps on a locked door. And somewhere beneath, something may be listening. But here's where the alignment with Atlas becomes impossible to ignore. Atlas is not just an interstellar wanderer, it's approaching with precision, its trajectory bending past the outer planets and angling toward the inner system. Almost as if it knows where to go, almost as if it expects to arrive when humanity is finally ready to trespass on Mars. This raises the terrifying possibility. Atlas and Mars are not separate mysteries, but two halves of a sequence, one above, one below, and humanity, by stepping between them, completes the circuit. So ask yourself this. When the first astronaut kneels to scoop a handful of Martian soil, are they collecting history, or are they performing a ritual, one scripted long before our species even dreamed of the stars? The moment that first handful of Martian soil is lifted, history will record it as triumph. But beneath the headlines and mission patches lies a danger scientists have whispered about for decades: the problem of forward contamination. On paper, it sounds like a technical issue, keeping Earth's bacteria from hitching a ride to Mars. In reality, it's something far stranger. Every microorganism we carry has a story billions of years old. They've survived radiation, volcanic eruptions, frozen oceans, even the vacuum of space in test chambers. They are, in a sense, nature's ultimate infiltrators. So when astronauts set foot on Mars, they're not just bringing themselves, they're bringing Earth's deep past. Imagine those microbes finding themselves in Martian regolith, frozen salts, perchlorates, dormant ice. To us, it's poison. To them, it could be opportunity. Here's the unsettling question. What if Mars has been empty by design? Not lifeless by accident, but sterilized long ago, waiting for something foreign to arrive. Our microbes could be the missing ingredient, the final reagent in a planetary-scale experiment. An experiment set up not by chance, but by intention. And that's where Atlas lingers at the edge of the story. Its trajectory feels almost timed, as though the interstellar visitor has been synchronizing with us. Think of it, humanity only gained the technology to reach Mars in the same century that Atlas appeared. 2 clocks, ticking down in silence, now striking the same moment together. This is not to say astronauts will recognize it. They'll celebrate, plant a flag, pose for cameras. But beneath their boots, an ancient system might be stirring. The soil could absorb Earth's microbes like a locked machine suddenly receiving its missing key. The airless silence of Mars may not be silence at all. It may be breath held, waiting for the right touch. So the haunting question becomes this: when humanity calls Mars ours, will the planet quietly agree? Or will it awaken to say, "I've been waiting for you"? For centuries, Mars has been the quiet neighbor, red, barren, and still. But silence isn't the same as absence. Silence can be a pause before the reply. And what if the planet has already begun to answer? Consider the strange whispers recorded by landers and orbiters, faint low-frequency rumbles, electromagnetic pulses, unexplained seismic tremors. NASA catalogues them clinically as Marsquakes or background magnetic fluctuations. Yet, they don't quite fit the models. The crust is too rigid, the signals too rhythmic. Some resemble patterns we'd associate with a heartbeat, slow, steady, and impossibly regular. Almost as if Mars isn't dead rock but something more, a body waiting for circulation to restart. Now, place that side by side with Atlas. While our rovers drilled into Martian soil, Atlas passed close enough to realign its trajectory by a fraction, so small it barely registered on astronomers' predictions, yet precise enough to look intentional. 2 separate events, 2 separate worlds, yet they unfolded like coordinated notes in the same score. Imagine the picture from above: astronauts disturbing Martian soil, microbes fusing with perchlorates, subtle chemistry beginning to unfold, and then, in the vast dark, Atlas drifting closer, its orbit shifting like an eye turning to watch, silence breaking not with sound, but with coincidence too sharp to ignore. If Mars is a stage, Atlas may be the spotlight. If Mars is a lock, Atlas could be the hand holding the key. And perhaps the most chilling thought of all, it's not humanity that made the first move. We may simply be performing our part in a script written long before us, because silence, when it finally answers, does so with intent. And on Mars, that intent may already be stirring beneath the dust, timed perfectly with something traveling through the stars. While Mars hums with tremors that don't quite belong, Atlas drifts on, an interstellar visitor whose timing feels more like choreography than chance. Astronomers call it 3-Eye Atlas, only the third known interstellar object to ever cross our solar system. To the textbooks, it's just a fragment of ice and dust, a cosmic wanderer swept into our neighborhood by gravity's invisible hand. But to the imagination, and increasingly to the data, it's something more deliberate. When scientists traced Atlas's trajectory, they found something unusual. Its path wasn't the lazy arc of a random drifter. Instead, it sliced cleanly through the solar system, grazing Mars's orbital neighborhood with uncanny precision. And that's what unsettled researchers most. It looked less like wandering and more like observing, almost as if Mars was its waypoint, not its accident. Now put yourself in the frame. Humanity stirs Martian dust, probes ancient rocks, and whispers into the silence. And at that very moment, Atlas arrives, coasting silently past as though checking for a signal. Two separate acts, unfolding at the same time. You don't need conspiracy theories to see the pattern. You only need to ask the question, why here? Why now? What if Atlas isn't just passing through? What if its orbit is part of a cycle, returning again and again to check a particular switch, like a caretaker visiting an abandoned building to ensure the machinery still works? The machinery in this case might be Mars itself, dormant systems hidden beneath dust, waiting for contact to awaken, because Atlas carries no engines, no thrusters, no obvious design. Yet its very path suggests intent, and intent, in the vacuum of space, is as loud as any voice. So here we stand, caught between two mysteries, one buried beneath red soil, one gliding through the stars. And as they edge closer together, it's no longer clear who is watching whom. If Atlas's passing was nothing more than cosmic coincidence, then the story should end there. A stray shard of ice tumbling through gravity's nets, forgotten in the darkness. But astronomers keep noticing something else, something harder to explain away. It isn't just that Atlas passed near Mars, it's when. You see, interstellar objects are vanishingly rare. In all of human history, we've officially recorded only 3: Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019, and then 3I Atlas. Each one should have been the astronomical equivalent of lightning, brilliant, brief, and utterly random. Yet Atlas, unlike the others, appeared almost timed. Right as humanity's rovers dug deeper into Martian soil, right as whispers of biosignatures were making headlines, Atlas swept by, its presence unnoticed by the public until after the fact. Coincidence or coordination? What unsettles scientists most is the rhythm. Mars itself has long held peculiar cycles, dust storms that rage on a near-clockwork schedule, magnetic pulses measured beneath its crust, even odd methane bursts detected at the same times each Martian year. They seem random until you overlay them. Then, disturbingly, they line up in patterns, quiet hums of repetition, like signals trying to sync with something far beyond Earth. Now imagine, Atlas glides through the solar system not to collide, not even to linger, but to measure. Like a surveyor brushing by a beacon, ensuring the frequency still holds. And if Mars is that beacon, what exactly is it transmitting? Or worse, what is it waiting to receive? This is where science blurs into speculation, because every observation we make, every drilled core sample, every rover broadcast adds another variable into the system. Perhaps we're not just uncovering Mars. Perhaps we're activating it, and Atlas's pass was less of a coincidence and more of a test, an orbital glance to confirm humanity has touched the switch. So when we speak of silence in space, maybe we're mishearing it. Maybe silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the pause between signals. Silence is deceptive on Mars. When you watch the feed from Perseverance or Curiosity, the landscape seems frozen in time. Red plains stretching endlessly, dunes shifting lazily in the thin air. But beneath that stillness, instruments whisper of movement. Methane flares erupt one season, vanish the next. Magnetometers pick up faint pulses beneath the crust, as if something ancient is breathing, waiting. Scientists have tried to explain these phenomena in neat, comfortable terms. Methane might come from rocks reacting with water. Magnetic anomalies could be remnants of an old planetary field, fractured and buried. But what unsettles researchers isn't the existence of these signals, it's the timing. Again and again, they sync with the moments humanity digs deepest. Take the so-called leopard spots Perseverance is studying. dark circles in Martian rock that on Earth usually form when microbes consume organic matter. When Perseverance drilled into them, sensors registered not just the expected minerals, but a subtle energy spike. Most dismissed it as static, a quirk of the instruments. Yet one detail slipped through. The anomaly pulsed in a rhythm eerily close to Mars's magnetic cycle. Coincidence? Or was something responding? Now imagine those minerals aren't just fossils of life long gone, but dormant nodes, tiny switches scattered like seeds, waiting for a signal from above. Atlas brushes by, the timing lines up, and suddenly the hum beneath the dust grows louder. Not life in the sense we expect, but a planetary system engineered to sleep until triggered. It raises a terrifying possibility. Every rover wheel that cuts into Martian soil, every drill that pierces deeper into its rocks is not a discovery, it's an activation. Mars isn't just a world we're exploring, it's a machine we might be waking up. And if Atlas's flyby was its way of checking the controls, what happens when the next visitor doesn't just pass by? What if the silence is about to end? For centuries, Mars has been more than a planet. To the Babylonians, it was Nergal, the god of plague and destruction. To the Greeks and Romans, it became Ares and Mars, the god of war. And across countless civilizations, the red light in the sky was a symbol not of hope, but of danger. It's easy to dismiss these stories as superstition, poetic metaphors for a crimson world drifting above. Yet consider this. Myths often carry fragments of truth encoded across generations. What if the ancients weren't inventing Mars's violence, but sensing it? Because here's where things grow unsettling. Modern instruments have recorded bursts of radiation near Mars that spike unpredictably. Solar winds crash against its thin atmosphere, stripping it bare. But sometimes, those storms grow strangely directional, as if guided, like a weapon adjusting its aim. Ancient myths spoke of Mars not as a passive light, but as a force that stirred conflict on Earth. And today, our data shows the planet does influence us, subtly through gravitational pulls, magnetic resonances, even shifts in solar cycles. It's as if Mars has always been tugging at the threads of human history. Now tie this back to Atlas. If its trajectory across the solar system is not random but purposeful, if its flyby pinged Mars like a hand knocking on a locked door, then humanity might not be the first to feel that stirring. Perhaps our ancestors sensed when Mars was activated before. Perhaps that's why they painted it as a war bringer, not a life bringer. So here's the uncomfortable question. Were ancient cultures warning us? Did they encode into myth the one thing science now hints at, that Mars is not just a world, but a system waiting for alignment? And if so, why are we so eager to wake it? Because if Atlas is the signal and Mars is the machine, then myth and science are converging into the same truth. We may have stumbled into a cycle far older than we realize. If myth gave us the first warnings, modern science has been recording its echoes. For decades, Mars has been whispering secrets into the instruments we've sent, and those whispers all point to one haunting possibility. The planet is not quiet. It is not dead. It is waiting. Take methane. On Earth, methane is a signature of life, produced by microbes, animals, and decay. The Curiosity rover has detected methane plumes rising from the Martian surface, sometimes vanishing within hours. Scientists have tried to explain it away. Geological activity, strange chemistry. But here's the issue. Mars should not be releasing methane at all. Its atmosphere is too thin, too hostile, too stripped by the sun's radiation. And yet the plumes return, almost as if they're timed. Or consider isotopes. Viking landers in the 1970s ran experiments that some researchers still insist revealed biological processes, microbes metabolizing nutrients. NASA quickly declared the results inconclusive, even misleading. But 50 years later, new analysis keeps circling back to the same anomaly. The data looks alive. And then there are the leopard spots, strange dark patches spreading across Martian dunes in the spring, captured by orbiters in high resolution. To some geologists, it's frozen carbon dioxide sublimating beneath the surface. But to others, the patterns look eerily biological, like blooms of something waking beneath the sand. None of these mysteries prove life, at least not in the way scientists like to define it, but layer them together. The methane pulses, the isotope anomalies, the seasonal spots, and a picture begins to form. Mars is not passive. It behaves like a system with rhythms, cycles, even reactions. Now imagine Atlas sweeping past, transmitting an electromagnetic pulse or subtle gravitational tug. If the plumes spike, if the leopard spots spread wider, if the whispers in the atmosphere grow louder, then we are not witnessing coincidence. We are witnessing response. And that brings us to the question no one dares ask out loud. What if Mars isn't producing these signals for us to find? What if it is producing them to signal back to something else? If Mars is sending signals, the unsettling question becomes, who is listening? For decades, agencies have quietly monitored the red planet's oddities, and not just through science. Buried in declassified documents and obscure radio logs is a troubling pattern. Every time Earth detects something strange on Mars, methane bursts, magnetic anomalies, unexplained radio pings, there is an almost immediate reaction from deep space listening posts. The European Space Agency's Mars Express once recorded an unexplained radio emission near the polar regions, sharp and structured, like a code fragment. The signal wasn't made public until years later, tucked away in technical appendices, and yet, almost within the same week, military radar installations on Earth's poles registered anomalies, bursts of interference on frequencies no civilian device should ever touch. Coincidence or coordination? Inside NASA, insiders whisper about the mirroring problem. Whenever rovers beam data back from Mars, small fragments appear distorted, as if piggybacking messages are layered inside. Engineers blame glitches, cosmic rays, hardware decay. But a handful of linguists buried in classified contracts believe they are seeing syntax, mathematical structures hidden within rover telemetry. And here's where Atlas re-enters the picture. Remember, it's traveling on a trajectory that sweeps it unnervingly close to the Martian orbit. Imagine, for a moment, that Mars isn't simply another planet, but a relay. A dormant archive, or worse, a listening station calibrated to awaken when an interstellar visitor passes within range. Atlas brushes by, Mars stirs, and Earth catches fragments of a conversation not meant for us. It reframes everything. The methane plumes are not accidents, they're flare signals. The leopard spots, not stains of geology, but biological markers triggered to align with orbital positions. And those hidden codes inside rover transmissions, perhaps not directed at Earth at all, but bouncing through us like static on a line towards someone or something else. This is the chapter where science blurs into strategy. Because if Mars is a node in a wider network, then the real story isn't about fossils or microbes. It's about who built the network and whether humanity has just accidentally tapped into a system that was never ours to enter. If Mars is more than a planet, if it is a node in some ancient relay, then the evidence should not just be in signals. It should be written into the planet's skin. And strangely, it is. Take the infamous face on Mars. For decades, skeptics dismissed it as a trick of shadows, a mesa made to look human by the low sun. But when higher resolution scans arrived years later, the story didn't end. It only deepened. Beneath the dust, symmetry still lingered, edges too straight, angles too sharp, almost as if erosion had done its best to erase a blueprint, but not quite enough. Nearby, the Cydonia region is littered with geometric anomalies, pyramid-like structures arranged in triangular formations. Scientists, desperate to avoid ridicule, labeled them natural. Yet mathematicians pointed out something haunting. Their alignment mirrors orbital patterns like a celestial clock designed to be read from above. And this is not isolated. In Gale Crater, the very ground Perseverance now explores, subtle hexagonal patterns are etched into the bedrock. On Earth, such geometry often arises from life or design. What if these shapes are not accidents of mineral growth, but remnants of something that once shaped Mars deliberately, leaving silent architecture beneath the dust? Atlas's timing makes this more unsettling. Its trajectory bends close enough to Mars to skim that ancient circuitry, like a hand brushing a harp string. The leopard spots, the methane plumes, even the faint coded echoes in rover transmissions. Suddenly, they resemble a system booting up, not a planet lying still. The question becomes unavoidable. Are we standing on the ruins of a failed experiment, or on the hidden machinery of a world designed for a purpose? And if Atlas is the key turning in that lock, what happens when the mechanism fully awakens? Because perhaps Mars was never meant to hide forever. Perhaps it was meant to lie dormant until someone or something returned to claim it. If Mars has been a machine in hibernation, then the unsettling truth is this: it may not be fully asleep anymore. Subtle signs suggest the gears are already beginning to turn. Consider the methane mystery. Every few months, orbiters and rovers detect sudden, unexplained spikes of methane seeping from beneath the surface. On Earth, methane is often a fingerprint of life, or at least active processes. Yet on Mars, the bursts come and go like timed pulses, almost as if they were signals or breaths. And then there are the seismic rumbles, so-called Marsquakes. Instruments have recorded tremors deep underground, faint but persistent. Scientists blame cooling crust or shifting rock. But the timing of some quakes, occurring close to Atlas's near-past trajectories, raises a haunting question. Are we mistaking mechanical vibrations for geology? Imagine a machine buried under kilometers of dust and stone, designed to sleep for millennia. It wouldn't simply roar awake in an instant. It would test its systems slowly, releasing pressure, checking signals, syncing with incoming commands. What if that's what we're witnessing now? A planetary system running diagnostics, while we naively call it geology. And here is where Atlas returns to the stage. Its alignment with Mars isn't just chance. If Mars was seeded as a listening post or a dormant archive, Atlas might be the key designed to awaken it. Each time it brushes close, more tremors, more chemical signatures, more anomalies stir on the red planet's surface. So, are we explorers of a world, or trespassers walking over the lid of something that was never meant to be disturbed? Because if Mars is no longer still, then we may not be the only ones watching Perseverance drill into its veins. What happens when the planet itself starts to respond? What if those pulses we measure aren't accidents of geology, but messages coded in rhythm? When methane flares spike, they don't just appear at random. Some clusters mirror repeating intervals, almost like heartbeat patterns. And in nature, repetition is rarely meaningless. Dig deeper, literally, and we find Perseverance drilling into strange mineral veins. Buried inside are structures that, under a microscope, look eerily organized. Rows, filaments, branching shapes that resemble circuitry more than fossilized microbes. NASA publishes cautious reports calling them complex mineral lattices. But one internal memo, leaked years ago, described them as non-random architecture. If that phrase doesn't raise questions, what would? Now picture the unsettling possibility. Atlas isn't approaching Mars by coincidence. What if the planet itself was designed as an interface, an ancient vault waiting for an external key? The timing of seismic murmurs, chemical releases, and mineral formations might not be geological noise at all, but part of a synchronization protocol. Think of it like a locked door that requires both sides to act. Atlas transmits a pulse. Mars responds with a tremor. A signal sent, a system awakened, an ancient handshake replayed after millennia of silence. And we're not just bystanders. Our rovers, our drills, our orbiters, all might be feeding back into the process. By touching Mars, by probing where we shouldn't, perhaps we've become the catalyst for something dormant to stir. Here's the hook that should keep you awake tonight. What if Mars was never meant to be colonized, but activated? Imagine brushing away Martian dust only to reveal not chaos, but order. Beneath the shifting sands, orbital radar has mapped geometric anomalies, triangular ridges aligned with uncanny precision, intersecting at perfect angles. At first, scientists filed them away as coincidence, wind-carved patterns of erosion. But when multiple formations across different regions line up to celestial coordinates, coincidence begins to lose its footing. Cydonia's face on Mars was dismissed decades ago, yet the fascination lingers not because of the shape itself, but because of the alignment. Structures, if we dare call them that, seem tethered to astronomical markers, solstice points, equinox shadows, and even Earth's orbital cycle. Who builds with such reference frames in mind unless the design is meant to be read like an interplanetary compass? But here's where it sharpens. Recent thermal scans picked up heat signatures under Gale Crater, concentrated in perfect hexagonal clusters. To the untrained eye, they're just variations in rock density. But hexagons aren't random. They are nature's most efficient blueprint, seen in honeycombs, crystal lattices, even the giant storm on Saturn. Efficiency is universal, and when efficiency is repeated across scales, it suggests intention. Now ask yourself, what if Mars itself is layered like a coded artifact? A surface of red dust masking an interior network designed to respond only when the right signal, Atlas's signal, is received. Every rover we send may not just be exploring. It may be tripping switches in a machine so vast we mistake it for a planet. And here's the unsettling twist. The more we map, the clearer the geometry becomes. The planet that looked dead, barren, random, suddenly takes on the silhouette of a blueprint. Not for life as we know it, but for a system waiting to be reawakened. What if Mars isn't the mystery, but the message? If Mars is the message, then who or what is the recipient? For months, data has been quietly streaming from the Perseverance rover, but buried in the noise of dust storms and drilling samples. There's something far stranger. Researchers noticed subtle fluctuations in the rover's signal strength, almost like a heartbeat. At first, they thought it was interference, solar winds bending radio waves. But then the pulses began to align with Atlas. 12 minutes after every outbound transmission to the interstellar object, Perseverance's signal flickers, as though Mars itself is echoing back the same rhythm. That timing is impossible to ignore. Mars shouldn't be aware of anything outside its orbit, let alone a body hurtling through interstellar space. And yet, the cadence is there. A steady dialogue between rock, dust, and an object not of this solar system. Imagine being one of the engineers in that control room, watching as lifeless geology starts to mimic communication patterns. One whispered it was like listening to a dead phone suddenly ring. Another compared it to standing in an empty cathedral, only to hear footsteps echo behind you. The language might not be words, but the synchronization is undeniable. And here's the darker thought. What if Mars was seeded to respond? A planetary-sized relay, dormant for eons, waiting for the right trigger. The leopard spots Perseverance drilled into may not just be chemical curiosities. They could be designed circuits, geobiological nodes engineered to wake up under certain frequencies. If so, then every drill, every laser, every signal we send may not be discovery. It may be activation. Because if Mars is answering Atlas, then Earth is next in line. The unsettling truth is that the synchronization didn't stop with Mars. Weeks after Perseverance's heartbeat was detected, the Deep Space Network in Canberra reported faint, repeating distortions in Earth's own ionosphere. At first, they dismissed it as background interference. Our planet is alive with electromagnetic chatter. But when they overlaid the pattern against Atlas's known pulses, something uncanny emerged. A third signal. Not Mars, not Atlas. Earth. It's faint, buried in the noise of thunderstorms, satellites, and radio towers, but unmistakable. Our planet is pulsing in harmony with the others, like a third instrument joining a duet. If that doesn't raise the hair on your arms, consider what it means. Atlas isn't just targeting Mars. It's tuning our entire solar system, weaving Earth into a frequency web we don't yet understand. Some scientists speculate that this is coincidence, that our planet's natural resonances happen to match. But the timing collapses that explanation. The flickers began precisely 12 minutes after Atlas's most recent transmissions. 12 minutes, the same interval as Mars, the same window our signals need to travel out and back. Too exact for accident. Think about what this suggests. Mars may not just be a testing ground or a relay. It may have been designed to awaken Earth itself. The leopard spots, the minerals, the dormant patterns, they're not isolated curiosities. They're practice runs. A system-wide awakening, timed to a visitor we barely understand, unfolding right now under our feet. And here's the part no one dares put in the official reports. If Earth has already begun to respond, then maybe we were never the observers in this story. Maybe we were always the experiment.